things like fake news, misinformation, and disinformation. So I am pleased to share with you that I have a co-moderator who will be helping in the afternoon today, Faith Cherono. She's an expert in communications, but she's also she also works with the Election Observation Group as part of promoting communications and things to do with monitoring, evaluation, and reporting and learning. So Faith will take charge of the first session of this afternoon. As we proceed along, then I will come in thereafter as we get to close today. So Faith, karibu sana. Just a clap for Faith. Coming in the afternoon with a lot of energy.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much. What can I say? My moderator, my senior moderator. Please let And I know now we're just from lunch and you're very tired, so really, let's just wake up to stretch kidogo. You know, this afternoon, if we don't do that, tutabaki tumelala, si ni ukweli? Please, let's stand. I humbly request you, let's all stand, let's stretch. So who's going to lead us in doing this? Who's going to lead us? Kuna wale wana, wakifikanga mambo ya energizer, they are very good at it. Who can lead us in stretching? Ama stretching tu ni kawaida. Kuna wale wanajua, nani atatusaidia? Kuna wale ambao wametoka Mombasa, Kuna Salim hapo, tafadhali Salim, njoo hapo kuja ukatuonyeshe jinsi ambayo tunaweza stretch. Hata mimi naye naweza ongea Kiswahili. Megan, very, very important. So, Salim, please take the floor. Please stretch.
Take a space.
Space hakuna.
So which organizations, how many civil societies are here?
Many.
How many? Okay. Let us write the word election. Hands up. 2 hands. E, how are we going to write them? N. How? Somebody show me letter N.
Idea.
Letter N? Like, I don't know. How?
We start again, okay? Election. Letter E.
Letter L.
Letter T.
Letter I. Letter I.
Letter O. Letter N. How? Are we okay? Okay, let us write letter 0 now. Legs apart. We write 0 while legs are apart, okay? Okay, let us write letter 0.
Hold on there.
Come up slowly, 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 slowly. I think that's it. Are we okay? Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Salim. Thank you so much, Salim from Mombasa. That was amazing, and I'm hoping that we are now awake, yeah? Yeah, so we are now energized for the next session. Now, I just want to appreciate our virtual participants, and we shared the links, and I'm hoping that you're sharing the links with your friends and your family and everyone, so that people can know that we are here discussing about matters to do with election. And so if you have not shared, kindly, I do request you to share so that everybody can join us on this platform. Now, we're also streamed live on Twitter, on Facebook, and on YouTube. There are those people who like saying Twitter, but for me, I like saying Twitter. It depends on where you went to school. Those who went to group of schools, they say what? Twitter, yeah? But for us who went to those schools that are still polling stations, we say what? Twitter. Okay. Now, without much of ado, I want to go straight to today's business, and the session that we are going to discuss right now is election and SIG, which is the special interest groups. And in this session, I'm going to invite Dr. Lawrence Mute. Kindly take your seat. Nyangori Ohenjo from Semiride. Kindly. Victor Nyongesa from Youth Agenda. You're welcome to the podium. We also have Sophie Kaibiria. Sophie Kaibiria. Okay, please take your seat. Okay, Sophie. Where is Sophie? The lady's in the house. Yeah? Sophie Kaibiria, kindly, you're welcome. And then we have Bernard Opio. Bernard Opio. Bernard Opio, kindly, where are you? Okay, fine. So I'll really request the people that have called out to join us in the podium so that we can discuss this important issue. And what we are going to discuss this afternoon is the 2022 electoral processes and inclusion, and the challenges that continue to impede the full participation of special interest group in the electoral processes. So we have our panelists here who are going to take us through that important session. And I'm going to give them like 5 to 10 minutes just to explain to us their take when it comes to the issue at hand. Thereafter, okay, thank you. Thereafter, you can ask questions, and then now we can get clarification of the questions that you have asked. So you're welcome. So let us just give time for them to settle. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. Okay, so now we are going to start with Dr. Lawrence Mute from UDPK, who is going to discuss about the election and the special interest groups.
Where do you want me to be?
Okay, you can just start here.
I need... Do you have a stand? Does the mic have a stand?
No, it doesn't.
No, you can't hold it from me.
Okay.
The mic needs to have a stand. It doesn't have a stand.
It doesn't have a stand.
We have a problem. No. Okay, let me see what I'll do. Thanks. So, good afternoon, people. Habari zenu? Unajua nimekuwa nikizungumza na watu na nimesikia pengine kuna wengine ambao wangependa kuzungumza Kiswahili, pengine si Kiingereza. And so I hope we are as inclusive as possible. And speaking of inclusion, before I proceed, I think it's important to state that obviously in a meeting like this one, and I'm sure Elog would know, because these are things which I'm sure would have discussed with some of them 20 years ago, I think inclusion would expect that you think about everybody else. So for example, you think about how shall we all communicate with each other. I notice outside there is a temporary ramp which has been put there, possibly because there are people here who cannot climb up there, outside there. So it's also about the hotels we go to. I mean, when we speak about elections and accessibility, these are the real life things that we'll be asking ourselves. So you'll be saying, where are we holding our meetings? Where we hold our meetings, are those places accessible? how shall I make my presentation? There needs to be a stand, because otherwise I can't use my hands. So I think it's small things like those that ultimately make a difference. But in any case, I think I can speak loudly. So you can hear me, right? Mnanskia? Excellent. So what I want to do is speak a little about elections, and I really hate this term, special interest groups. When we were at Bomas of Kenya, we resisted that particular term, tag, because I don't think the youth and the disabled and others are special interest groups. I think there is a better term for us, but it's our constitution, so we shall work with this. Now, we saw interesting figures from the IEBC, the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, that actually, that persons with disabilities, those who were registered for this election cycle, were as many as 8.7%, which was quite interesting, of registered voters. Now, that was quite interesting. Of course, the question then is, but who are we? Who are we? So it's people like me, people who are blind, or people who have low vision. It's people who have mobility impairments. You know, their arms, their legs, perhaps their spinal cord, their spine. It's people who have intellectual disabilities, or people who have a mentor, what you call mentor, what we might call psychosocial disabilities. It's people who have multiple disabilities. So that's who we are speaking about. So clearly, we're speaking about a fairly diverse range of people. And all these people are people who would be clamoring to become voters. Now, I must say that the conclusion which some of us make, and here I speak on behalf of the Caucus on Disability Rights Advocacy, which we work with on issues of elections and others, is that in overall terms, the 2022 general elections were by and large still, fairly exclusive in the sense of people with disabilities could have been included more, could have been accommodated more. Now, this is not to say that the election management bodies did not do things. So if you speak about the ORPP or the IEBC, they did things. They sought to engage. They facilitated meetings. The IEBC even worked with the Caucus of Disability Rights Advocacy to form what was styled the Disability Inclusion Coordinating Committee. I think the challenge is that when it came to the crunch, words remained just that. Words remained rhetoric. Words did not become concrete actions. So you can go to all these meetings with the ORPP, you can go to all these meetings with the IEBC, but ultimately does it make a difference on polling day? And I want to illustrate with three things. One, the question of membership and staff. And don't tell me that this is neither here nor there. The example I just gave you earlier about which hotel do we go to is symptomatic of, do you have people within your ranks, either at the leadership level, at the policy level, at the level of staff, who will be able to say, by the way, this is what needs to happen in order to ensure inclusion. And so I must say, something which has been said in the past, it was significant that none of the EMBs had policy level members with disabilities. And also, if you look, for example, at the IEBC, we did not have publicized disaggregated data on numbers of staff with disabilities. So, and I'm saying that's neither here nor there. That's important. Point number two, polling. Because I can't speak to too many issues because of time, but polling. Now, there was monitoring which was undertaken obviously by many people, but also including CDRA, who did monitoring, for example, in Nairobi, in Kiambu, in Machakos, in a number of other places. And the sorts of things which we found
were that the majority of polling centers, remember we're speaking about schools. So actually the bottom line then becomes, to what extent are our schools accessible to persons with disabilities? And remember the range of disabled people or typologies I mentioned. So it's about things like, are you accessible to voters with disabilities? The steps, the high slabs, storied centers, first floor, second floor, obstacles on walkways, inaccessible toilets, low lighting, inaccessible drop-off points, inaccessible booths, things like those. And I'm sure as some of my colleagues might speak to in a while, that remained a problem in many instances. Not always, but in many instances. And also then the secrecy of the ballot for voters using assisted voting, that again worked because I was assisted, but also sometimes, unfortunately, it was undermined because of this bizarre misunderstanding of the regulations. There are party agents who thought, hey, this guy is being assisted. We need to congregate around him to make sure that the assister does the right thing. Wrong. The assister is supposed to do it on their own with me. That is a law. That's how secrecy should work, but quite a lot of the time that was not understood. But then the final thing I wish to speak about, which I think for now may be the most important, is in respect of representation of persons with disabilities in political bodies. So the key concern here, and we can think about moving forward, but the key concern for persons with disabilities is that actually, when you look at the 2022 elections, what they have done, the results and moving forward now, they actually have manifested the trend of pushbacks on the representation of persons with disabilities, which was witnessed in the 2017 general elections and particularly in the 2017 general elections. Now, what do I mean? What I'm saying is that you look at political parties, you look at the election management bodies, and are we moving forward in terms of our representation? We are extremely doubtful. What do I mean? Now, I'll give you an example of this blind candidate from Kitui who filed a grievance on his exclusion from the special interest party list of WIPA for Kitui County Assembly. Now, WIPA did not turn up at the Election Disputes Resolution Tribunal, and the grievance was determined in favor of the complainant. But what do you think WIPA did? WIPA simply, in fact, the word I'm using is fairly strong. I think what WIPA did is that it castrated the political intention or intent of that complainant by placing him onto the gender top-up list. So unatolewa kwa ile marginalized, unawekwa kwa gender top-up. Now, if you're a man, of course, I mean, you've been killed. You can't exactly go back anywhere, can you? Or again, take the presidential candidacy of, Ruben Kigame. I think where it seemed that the IEBC was actually intent on ensuring that he would not be on the ballot. Now, what is the most important point I'm making? The point I really must make is this one. If you look at the 2022 electoral cycle, at least 22 county assemblies presently do not have MCAs with disabilities. They do not have MCAs with disabilities at all. And this is up. In 2017, you had 17 counties which didn't have MCAs with disabilities. In 2013, you had only 4. Our fear is that moving forward, if something is not done clearly, you're going to have 25, then possibly all the 47 in due course. The case that persons with disabilities are making is that a county assembly may not be fully and duly constituted until it includes MCAs with disabilities. So we're speaking about counties like Nairobi, which don't have an MCA with disabilities, and 21 other counties. And I invite all of you, ladies and gentlemen, look at Section 7A of the County Governments Act, which essentially says that a county assembly gets constituted. A county assembly shall not be fully and duly constituted for the first sitting after a general election unless all the members provided for under paragraphs B and C of Article 177(1) of the Constitution have been duly nominated and their names published in the Gazette. And one of those categories of people would be people with disabilities. So as we move forward, some of the suggestions which we'll be making would be that we need to have the IEBC, we need to have the courts, we need to have political parties interpreting the law as it should be. You asked me, what did political parties do? What they did actually was quite ingenious, but also quite cynical. They simply said, we shall follow the rules. What we shall do, because we have 8 slots for the marginalized, we shall put a disabled person number 6, number 7. Number 6, number 7. Now, when you do that, obviously, the candidates who are likely to ultimately be included on the list will be number 1, number 2. So, across Kenya, political parties will say, we did what we need to do. There were disabled people on our list. But if they were number 5, number 6, there is no way they are actually going to be on the list. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, I wish to stress the importance of good faith. Earlier today, the discussion was about faith-based organizations and what they have done. And one of the ambassadors spoke about trust. Here I'm speaking about good faith. So, good faith, what do I mean? Good faith is a basic principle of good governance. Good faith requires parties to deal fairly with each other, not cynically, to represent their motives and purposes truthfully, and to refrain from taking any unfair advantage. So if the law says there should be MCAs who have disabilities, good faith anticipates that ODM, Jubilee, and everybody else will rank those people highly enough for them to go to parliament or for them to go to assemblies. And if that doesn't happen, then the IEBC needs to have the wherewithal to be able to do that. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Lawrence Mute, for that amazing presentation. There's one person called Leo, and Leo said that the most powerful warriors, the most powerful warriors are patience and time. And you can see my panelists are doing such an amazing job. We said 5 to 10 minutes, and 10 minutes, Daktari was done, okay? So we are going with that spirit. So I'm going to request Mr. Nyangori. I think doctor is in my mouth. It shows that we are heading there. Eh? Yeah, so I'm going to invite Mr. Nyangori from Semirai to come and give us his presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you once again. Dr. Lawrence, I don't know where we'll get the good faith from as we head to 2027, because that is something we really have in deficit in Kenyan politics. Now, I'm going to speak about minorities and marginalized communities in the context of representation and participation in the just concluded elections, and how we move forward. And first thing I just want to emphasize on is the whole question of blanketing, as Dr. says, special interest groups being put into a bracket. The truth of the matter is that it actually continues to exclude these targeted groups in a way that it completely disempowers them. We'll see bits and pieces of how as we progress. Now, this is particularly important because the emphasis in the Constitution under Article 100 is based on very specifically identified groups. So the idea of coming up with other terminologies in a one-size-fits-all kind of situation is not something that would really want to support. Now, one critical issue when it comes to participation is identification. I'm trying to avoid the word definition because within our context, there isn't a uniform definition of either minorities or indigenous peoples, and therefore what is commonly used as identification. There's a criteria that is used to identify who minorities are and who indigenous peoples are. And this particular subject has been canvassed in Kenya before. In 2004, when the Ilchamus community went to court to claim their rights to representation, this issue was deliberated on, and the Kenyan High Court, in setting up jurisprudence, adopted the definition or the identification criteria given by International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, Article 27, which provides that these are groups of people or communities that are in a non-dominant position. But on top of that, just being in a non-dominant position is not enough. They've suffered discrimination. So there must be evidence of having suffered discrimination. There must be evidence that they have some sense of belonging, some cultural togetherness that they want to uphold. And this could be in different groups. You could talk of ethnic minorities, which actually are identified in the Constitution. You could talk of national minorities, linguistic minorities, where in this particular case, where we talk of linguistic minorities, these are communities that have suffered assimilationist tendencies within other groups. And there's so many in the Kenyan scenario. You have, for instance, the Ogiek, who have suffered assimilation. And this is something that was a policy issue way back in 1933, where the government targeted those communities for assimilationist tendencies. You have the Terik, you have the Yaku in Laikipia, and so many others. Or you could also have indigenous peoples who, because of their distinctiveness, sometimes are always viewed as uncivilized. So the idea is, why can't these people be assimilated into other communities or forced to change so that we have some bit of uniformity? Now, having said that, because of those issues that were raised, then the Constitution set up some standards and said, through Article 56 and Article 100, that there must be special measures to ensure that these communities' rights are protected and advanced. Article 100 actually goes ahead to mention which particular marginalized groups it speaks to, and those are women, youth, persons with disabilities, ethnic and other minorities, and marginalized communities. I'm focusing on ethnic, minorities, and marginalized communities. Now that provides a basis and the foundation, and we expect that the electoral framework then should actually then move ahead to ensure that it meets the provisions of those two articles in respect to representation and participation of minorities and marginalized communities. And marginalized communities, just to clarify, are actually defined in Article 260 of the Constitution. And therefore, through Article 56, Sub-Article A, affirmative action is provided for these communities to participate in governance and other spheres of life that are of direct concern to them. Now, the problem is that heading into the 2022 elections, and of course previously, there has been no distinctive legislative framework to date to ensure this representation, even with the provisions that exist. What appears are piecemeal mentions of ethnic minorities and marginalized communities here and there in the electoral processes, legislation and frameworks. And because there isn't any specific attempt to ensure that there's a very distinct provision for identification of these particular communities, this has actually been abused in the country, especially around nominations and even representation in electoral management bodies. And the result has been that these communities have continued to be excluded in very critical processes. And given that participation is the bedrock of democracy, then it means that this very critical section of society is not participating in governance and democracy of this country, which is something that is not very interesting, and we cannot applaud it. Now, without effective legislation, it then follows that there is need to really start very deliberately thinking about how best can we achieve the participation and involvement of minorities, indigenous peoples, who in this particular case include marginalized communities in political participation in Kenya. Something to note here, and I think it was mentioned, and I would like to just go back to it, is the 2019 bill that was sought to achieve this. And I think it has been mentioned here, and I would like to counteract that when the chairman of JLAC said that some of these things are unachievable. There's nothing that is not achievable in Kenya. We cannot sit back. That is defeatist. We cannot sit back and say we cannot achieve affirmative action in whatever format. I think that is defeatist. To some extent, that is just being, I would use the word lazy, or that is being overprotective of our own, how would I put this, what we are enjoying to the exclusion of others. We want a society that is very cohesive, and if we have to have this society, then we must make sure that we are leaving no one behind. We must make sure that we're not making decisions about people without them being on that table. So when you look at that bill, which I think someone mentioned that they would want to reintroduce it in Parliament, there's this provision where the bill provides for 5% of nominees for parliamentary and county assembly elections as special interest groups, and that is why we are resisting this word special interest groups. So when you talk of 5% of special interest groups, what does that exactly mean? When you have women, you have persons with disabilities, you have minorities, you have marginalized communities under the so-called bracket. So if a nomination, let's say, only had persons with disabilities, would it mean that then the rest of the groups under that particular bracket are of no value? That is a question that we should be asking ourselves. So we need to actually just unpack everything and make sure that if you're talking about representation, then every other critical constituency should be represented within its own uniqueness and using unique methodologies. That bill also does not define who minorities are. It only says that these are non-dominant groups. Now, and again for emphasis, minorities are not just necessarily numbers. It's important that we note that. It's not just numbers. There are other factors that need to be considered. One thing going forward that is also important is that in 2022, that was just before the elections, the High Court actually ordered the government through the ORPP to ensure that it puts in place measures guaranteeing full enjoyment of fundamental rights and freedoms, especially with specific attention to minorities and IPs. Kenya has recognized existence of IPs when it was doing its 4th report to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. In the 3rd cycle of the Universal Periodic Review, Kenya accepted a recommendation to ensure that it puts in place mechanisms to ensure participation of IPs in all matters that affect them. So what is the way forward? So what we're saying is that Kenya, as somebody has said, has a lot of provisions that would enhance participation of minorities and indigenous peoples. What is lacking is that good faith. And that is why I was asking, where are we going to get this good faith from? Because you go to international platforms, you say, yeah, we recognize minorities and we're going to put in place measures. However, when it comes to, or where it comes to where the rubber meets the road, then there's laxity. Nothing is put in place. So one thing is that there's need for a very deliberate legislative framework, specifically to ensure that Article 56 and 100 in respect of minorities and indigenous peoples is being implemented. And that means setting up an institutional framework, not just legislation, an institutional framework that is very specific to meeting that mandate. There must be a formula to ensure that representation, even if it means, and this is not probably only for minorities and marginalized communities, we're talking about all the other groups where that formula, the representation has not been met, especially for women. Let us go outside the box, and we can start thinking about what was initially in the Bomas draft about coming up with electoral colleges. We don't need to amend the constitution. What we need is a specific law and not an omnibus. There must be a specific law that will create some electoral colleges to meet the 2/3 gender rule. In any case, the constitution provides for delimitation, which means that the number of constituencies are going to change from the 290 to a different number. And third and final, it's to provide for representation through what we call delimitation that is very specific to communities where they can be identifiable. Some communities have already gone to court seeking that representation. So where that is possible, let us ensure, IBC, that we are providing that opportunity for these communities that can be able to demonstrate community of interest, historical, economic and cultural rights, and give them that that representation as provided for under Article 89, Sub-Article 5 of the Constitution of Kenya. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Nyang'ori, for your presentation. Now, I want to welcome the Executive Director from Youth Agenda, who is Mr. Victor Nyongesa. I don't know, now him being a youth, do we say tunataka kumu-invite? You know, do we use Sheng or what do we do? You see, you know, he's a friend of mine at the same time, the Executive Director, so I'm proud to be a friend to an Executive Director. Anyway, welcome, Mr. Victor.
Thank you very much, Faith. And I'm of the opinion probably we also consider using Sheng. And I've also noted that most of us have promised to speak in Swahili, but we end up again speaking English throughout our presentations. So I want to promise you, I'm going to try my best to speak English as well. So it's an honor to speak to you as a young person representing many youth of this country. And also just to share some of our experiences as young people. Of course, when you talk about young people, there's a lot that comes in our heads, in our minds. There are so many issues that we are struggling with. Zingine ni za kujitakia, zingine ni zile zenye zimewekwa pale through legal frameworks that probably hinder our participation in electoral processes. Before I give my presentation, You know, the beauty of speaking in the afternoon is, especially after a heavy meal, that the one we've had, is very few will concentrate, very few will pay attention. And of course, it means nitapata few questions at the end of my presentation. Just to kickstart my presentation, I want to ask a question to you all. It's just a general question. Elections are only elections are only fair when your candidate wins. Is that statement correct? Just looking at the Kenyan context, elections are only fair when only your candidate wins. Just looking at the Kenyan context. It's true, right? We've seen situations where most of, even just looking at the candidates, when they lose, there's always your kusema, elections ilibiwa. Si ni ukweli? And even when we move after court rulings, still tunasemanga, yes, we will, as much as nilimeonewa, but nitafuata chenye koti imesema. So that still shows that still you are not convinced as a candidate that probably you lost in that election. But I think it's because we misinterpret the term fair when it comes to elections. When you talk about fair, it's not in the outcome, it's in the process. But most of us tend to look at the outcome of a process. And that's why in most cases, when it comes to every elections, there's always that term, election equal, free and fair and all that. So back to my presentation. There are quite a number of issues that probably some of them are recurring if you do just the analysis of the 2013, 2017, and the recent elections that probably are a hindrance to young people, their participation in the electoral process. The first issue is recently in the 2022 general elections, we saw what we call negotiated democracy. Political party inakaa chini, they bring the candidates together, wanasema now you guys discuss and let's give this person. We also saw what we call direct nominations. Political party, you are a candidate for a certain seat, a certain position, but you realize that the party you are in already may front a certain candidate. And unfortunately, the losers of this negotiated democracy and direct nominations, majority were young people, youth. Also, I know our brothers and sisters with this able differently. Also, some of them were losers when it came to negotiated democracy or direct nominations. This is something that has always been there. Direct nomination in 2013, it was there. 2017, it was there. And it's still recurring. It denies majority of the people out there who have the potential to make good leaders an opportunity to vie. And going forward, there is need for us as stakeholders. We need to have a candid conversation on this. How can we address this animal? Now there is negotiated democracy. And if we do not address it now, it's going to be there again in 2027. Low registration turnout by young people. And today, if I ask that question in this room, what's the reason? What do you think is the reason why young people do not turn out in large numbers to register and even vote? I know majority will say lack of civic education, voter education and all that. Yes, that's one of the reasons. But if you look at the report done by ELOG recently, the reasons why young people, especially the Generation Z, those one between 18 to 22, 18 to 23 there, majority did not vote because they do not have IDs. And ushago uka apply ID, then you came to Nairobi. You stay in Nairobi for almost 8 months. Your ID is back in the village, but you're in Nairobi, haujaenda kuchukua hizo ID. Still, there are officers in various regions, ukienda kwa hizo offices, there are so many uncollected IDs. Perhaps we say it's time we start encouraging the government to use chiefs and local administrators to, of course, disseminate those IDs. But the issue of access to ID or lack of IDs was the main reasons why the Generation Z did not register in the just concluded elections. Disinterest in election. Again, young people not interested in elections, especially the Generation Z. The question I want to ask is, what do you think our brothers and sisters, our young brothers and sisters are not interested in elections? It's because they hear what we talk about. They interact with us. And it has been the same narrative. After election, the day you vote, until the next election again, we are always complaining, I made a wrong choice. This government is not performing. All that, of course, it creates that perception. And these brothers and sisters, they've grown with that perception that in this country, even participating in election does not guarantee that you are going to change anything. They do not have that interest unless we come up with structured, proper measures to interact with these young people and find a way of how to change their perception about elections. Still, the issue of lack of trust. It's still, again, the main reason why young people did not come out in large numbers to engage or to participate in that process. They do not have trust in elections, in electoral bodies. And this is something that our key institutions in this room, IEBC, ORPP, political parties, and many more, how do we rebuild trust in our brothers and sisters who we expect by 2027 again, we expect them to, of course, take part in this critical process. Other than the issue of low registration and turnout, if you look at the just concluded election, and again, I listened to the previous panel presentation before we went for lunch, and one of the panelists talked about Campaign Financing Act, whether it's time to reconsider what we are asking for. But let's be honest with ourselves. In this country, kama hauna pesa, then it's very difficult for you to win that seat. Si ni kweli? I know CSOs, civil society organization, tutakuja tukwambie, it's possible for you to go without a shilling to convince people when the door to door, uongea na watu. Si ni kweli? We will tell you that. But the reality is, if you do not have money in this country, then it becomes very difficult for you to even contest a certain political seat. Pesa ya campaign, what the society or the community expect from you. For you to be able to run a successful campaign, how do you brand yourself and all that? Inahitaji pesa. So, let's be honest, I think we really need still to push for implementation of the Campaign Financing Act, because at least it's going to lay a fair ground for those ones of us who are interested in election. And when you talk about, just compare what young people are spending when it comes to elections and what the veterans, the guys who have been in that space for a very long period, guys spend billions and billions. Unaambia kijana ajipange na 100,000 Z. Fourth point, decline in civic education. And this one, again, I want to be honest, because it's something that I experienced, and also I've interacted with so many institutions, and they've talked about, they've also raised the same issue. If you compare the way, if you compare the 2022 general elections and the previous elections, from the civic education perspective, you will realize that this election, the civic education this year was a bit low compared to the previous elections. Reason being, for those ones who are in the civil society organization will say there was low financial resources to support civic education, And it forced most institutions just to rely on social media. Do a poster, put it out there. Tomorrow again, do another poster, put it out there. But if you look at the 2017 elections, institutions were on the ground doing civic educations. And again, just from a youth perspective, the little resources that were available to support youth inclusion in the electoral process did not go to youth-serving organizations, unfortunately. It went to mainstream organizations that have been there, and probably the youth perspective is not their main area of focus. And if you look at what they did, most of them focused on electoral reforms and forgot about civic education and encouraging young people to take part in the just concluded elections. And that's one of the things that probably we were able to observe in the just concluded elections. I see time is not on my side. Weak institutional capacity within political parties. And I was privileged to observe party primaries. And I attended one of the, of course, in Kakamega. You know, some political parties decided to use even the 2017 register. And when you use 2017 register, then you are locking out this generation that registered after that elections. Especially, majority are young people, those who registered in 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021. They were locked out. And I was privileged to see a young candidate. She could not even vote for herself because she was not in the 2017 register. So young people, for those ones who are interested in taking part in the political party primaries, some of them were locked out just because of such instances. And probably my second last point is failure to, one thing that we were also able to observe in this general election is, I've heard today people have talked about numbers in terms of how many women were elected, how many women went to vied for the various political seats. We've talked about how many persons able different were elected. But today, it's still not possible, it's not still not clear on how many youth vied, how many youth were elected in the just concluded election. Reason being, there's no that data for us to consume. And if it's there, then it's not in the public domain for us to be able to consume. So, personally, I've taken an initiative of writing to IEBC. I've written even to ORPP, requesting for information on how many young people went to, were interested in party primaries, vied, how many came out victorious and went to the main elections, vied, competed and won. To date, I haven't received that feedback. It's over 2 months now. My last point is we, as young people, still are less informed about political parties, and I'm happy we have someone from a representative from the Ford Kenya party. In this country, we have 87 political parties. But if you interact with young people out there, most of them know just the main, the big political parties that we know. And again, most of them tend to confuse political parties and coalitions. The difference between a coalition and a political party is a challenge to most young people out there. And that's why sometimes you see when most of them, when they do not get a UDA ticket or an ODM ticket, then what they think about is vying as independent candidates. And yet there are 87 political parties within the country. And just to conclude, for those ones who are pushing for women inclusion, I think it's time also for us to rethink or to look at what exactly are we pushing for. It's good to push for women inclusion, but do we really ask ourselves, are we also considering young women who are between 18 to 35? Yes, women, we've now started seeing change, but it's time we also start thinking of how can we ensure that those ones who are nominated or those ones who are given these opportunities, some of them are young women who are between 18 to 35 years. And that's one of the reasons, that's one of the way we will increase the number of youth in various positions in this country. I want to end my presentation there, and thanks so much. I look forward to the questions.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Victor. The youth who are here, we usually say, mambo ni mengi na masa? Machache, my friend, that is him. Yeah, because he has a lot of things that he needs to say, but again, I think time is not on our side. So I'm going to invite one special person called Mr. Bernard Opio. Mr. Bernard was our Embakasi observer, and he's going to talk from a perspective of, you know, him being an observer and him being in this group. So what are some of the challenges and what are some of the things that he experienced during that time? So karibu Bwana Bernard.
Good afternoon, everybody. Allow me, I'll talk in a mask because I have a slight cough, so I don't want to affect others, okay? Yeah, my name is Bernard Opio. Just I was an observer for Embakasi East. But today, I want just to highlight some of the challenges we are going through, especially during the actual day. What we saw, what we are there. So if you look at the challenges, which we are, much of it is the infrastructure. When I was going around, you find some of the polling centers or polling stations are upstairs. And I was really pitting with the category of the wheelchair users and also the deafs. You know, when I'm going to the polling station, with me, the officer of the IBC will just recognize me and call me immediately to pass. But in case of a deaf person, before even you realize that he is deaf, you cannot allow him, or you cannot understand her or him. So those are the challenges which one of the things which we are getting. And also the wheelchair person. When the polling station is on in the upstairs, maybe first floor, second floor, he is supposed to be carried. But sometimes I included, I feel the mean when I'm carried by that one, because not everybody, somebody carrying you will not carry you with respect. And even, just look at it during your campaign, even to the normal circumstances, our ladies who are vying at the presidency or MPs, you find that when you are climbing that heavy lorry and the youths are trying to support you, sometimes they do it even in a very awkward way, isn't it? So that was one of the challenges we have there. And then we are talking about language barrier. In fact, if possible, the IBC, because I know they are the main people here, we should have at least an interpreter in every polling center. Even if it's only one, we can use that person, because when a deaf person comes, he'll be able to get an interpreter who will be assisting at least. And secondly, you know, when we are registering for elections, normally we indicate. That means the electoral body cannot tell us an excuse that we don't know how many PWDs will be in that area or in that constituency or in that particular center. So if possible, instead of making many problems, you can as well have a special room where, because I know they were talking about finances and what have you, but these are centers which we always know. There have been centers for elections since immemorial. So why don't we just even take as a room or possibly a tent to be used by those with special needs. Okay, so that's another one. The other problem was about when we are sensitizing, training them, when they were going around training about the elections and the patterns of voting. You find that the brailles, sometimes when you read it yourself, you understand more. This is these brailles are necessary for us, especially to the visually impaired. These braille materials, we don't need much, but we need them to be in every constituency election office, IBC office, so that at least we can use them by those which are visually impaired. We are starting. We said the election is a process. We have just started, and we are approaching 2027. At least by the year 2025, they should have them, because that's also the time we should also have sensitized those people on how to elect and the importance of elections. So the reason why we are talking about it is there's no funds, because that's what they were told when we were raising such issues. They were told there's not enough funds in the IBC to develop such thing. Yet we have people like Dr. here who can always advise if it's a matter of braille material. They can always do this and this. So instead of us being in such a situation, we can always go ahead and get them. And finally, because I just want to donate some of my minutes, it's now general. And it's a general question which you can either ask, you can either answer, or just put it as a food for thought. And it's our general which is affecting you, affecting me, and my children. Is affecting all Kenyans. It is like this. How can we describe independence in our institutions? Why am I saying this? It's because, look at, for instance, our president, His Excellency, William Ruto. Today, another could appear even here to have lunch with us. Tomorrow, like for instance, in Parliament. Tomorrow, you feel that he's in judiciary having lunch. Maybe I'm just giving example, not that he's doing that way. So when do we describe that this is now on a personal problem? It's a democratic, because we are a democratic country. And being a democratic does not mean I cannot talk to you or me. Let's see another scenario whereby our speaker, Moses Wetangula, whatever. Moses Wetangula is a brother to Tim Wanyonyi. And today, ODM person will see Tim with his brother. Then he says that person has been pocketed. Okay? And so can we describe how we can know it is up to this boundary, so that you just know. Instead of when you see somebody talking to someone, especially in the field of election, political material, you say, we are Mesaama, Akohuku. Or this one has just been grabbed to this side. But remember, these are brothers, maybe, or they are friends, because in a democracy, we are not enemies. I can talk to you, I can talk to you, but that freedom in our country, I have not seen it, because anytime you are trying to do that, that means you have been absorbed. And finally, and most finally, it's about the police brutality. Yes, we don't encourage brutality, police brutality, but who should be made answerable mostly? Because these police officers are also our brothers and sisters. And when they are staying in command, they are commanded, go do, go do, go do. So when things come worse, those who have been commanded are the ones picked. For instance, the cases which are just seeing on the ground now, I'm just asking you to think about that also, that when you have been commanded to do something and with your commander, who is answerable? For instance, when the money is stolen in the ministry, we are always appointing the minister in charge. What if the police officer has brutally injured a citizen? Who should be? Food for thought. Thank you so much, and God bless you all.
Okay, thank you so much for that amazing presentation. And now, looking at the podium, we have a rare species. And you know, when you say rare species, namaanisha something that is unique. Si ni ukweli? So I'm going to introduce her differently because she's rare. Yeah? So you'll allow me the other species in the house when you feel offended. I'm really sorry for that. But anyway, allow me to welcome an experienced advocate with a proven record in research, drafting and program planning and management. She has the desire to impart 10 years of law democracy and governance experience in access to justice, gender programming, policy and legislative development, stakeholder engagement, constitutional implementation, and the judiciary. She has a background on program management, and she works for FIDA as a senior program officer. Karibu.
Thank you very much. Coming last after these four gentlemen, I'm glad that I'm here at this point. Being a woman representing FIDA Kenya, Federation of Women Lawyers Kenya, I am sure most of you know what FIDA stands for. However, let me just reiterate. We advocate for the rights of women and girls in all spaces, social, economic, and political. But because you are here for the symposium on post-election, I will focus on the elections, our experience and challenges and opportunities that we saw when we had the last general elections. Now, so my co-panelists have really talked about the special interest group, where women sometimes fall. However, when we talk about special interest groups, I will join with Nyangori and say this, Nyangori and Dr. Mute, in stating that this particular term is quite, is not well defined, and it's upon us as, you know, Kenyans, civil society organization and stakeholders to come in and define it definitively to ensure that all the groups are catered for. This is part of the conversation that we had when we had a symposium to discuss special interest groups last week in collaboration with ELOG and stakeholders in the room. And we discussed this particular issue focusing on the diversity when you look at special interest groups. For instance, when you talk about women, I come in here not representing the kawaida woman. I represent all women. These are women from marginalized communities, women with disabilities, women who are in the youth bracket, and indeed, Mr. Nyongesa, you may well know that we support even that category, because these are our constituents as women in Kenya who need to be part of the democratic process. But because this democratic process is our space and is what the Constitution has provided. Now, going back to the findings and the matrix, and also a bit of the discussion from the symposium that we had last week, and taking interest with the time, I will go quickly and say that some of the most pertinent issues when you look at representation of the special interest groups and focus on women. First of all, I will join my compatriots, the previous speakers who talked about political parties. Political parties, I believe, are the right, they're the gatekeepers for representation of women in politics. So here is where we should focus our energy in empowering these political parties and, of course, engaging them effectively to ensure that when they are doing their party lists, when they're nominating, when they are doing the overall recruitment, women come in and be part of it. Because when they are part of it, then that's when they'll be thought about when it comes to elections. Generally speaking, that's what happens in Kenya. Also, when you look at the electoral process, when it comes to a woman, it becomes difficult, first of all, because of the resourcing. The actual funding for that election, kwenda kwa mchujo, you have to really resource, whether material resource or social capital. And to leverage on that, we have seen, even in the demographics that have been released by KNBS, the controllers of resources are usually men, because we live in a patriarchal society. I know this is a debate that can go on and on, but it is the truth. Then secondly, when you look at the dynamics of politics, they are usually very masculine. How many of us know that when you discuss those, how to dish out tickets, they are done during the night, 2 a.m. How secure is that for a woman, for a young person? It is not. So if we can bring a systemic way of having political parties do their things properly in a more participatory democratic space that is within, the appropriate hours, then makes it possible for adequate participation of women. Then, when you look at the elections landscape, it's been a cycle since 2010. We've done 3 elections under this constitution. Now, each elections, we've improved tremendously. And there is the gains. The gains, of course, affect the women. We've seen in 2013, even when you look at the gender audits that we did with NDI, 2013, 2017, there has been an incremental number of women participating, either as candidates and also the elections themselves. They come in numbers. They keep on increasing. Why? Because the institutions that have been put in place, for example, the judiciary, have come in place to ensure that there is justice for those people who seek the elective office. The other gain I can say is that with all this kind of interest in elections, we've seen greater numbers of nominees getting nominated as deputy governor. Now we have like 7. In 2013, there were less. We've seen a major political party nominate a deputy president. So that, for me, is a gain. And for FIDA also is a gain, because it means the generations that come in, the youth generation that Nyongesa was talking about, will see an opportunity for them to engage as a woman who is a youth and can participate. Now, some of the changes that have been put in place in the legislature, although not conclusively, like the Political Parties Act, in terms of funding and ensuring that parties give the 2/3 gender lists when they are nominating, has made it possible for political parties to see that even the institutions that are engaged in the electoral process, the ORPP, IBC, and the courts themselves, they are there to protect the interests of women and the special interest groups. So for me, those are the gains we've seen in these elections. Now, what I foresee and what I believe is something that we should look into is the findings that we had from the last week's engagements. I will quickly read through because we developed a matrix on the findings and the recommendations. So I'll quickly read through. When it comes to women engagement, one of the key issues comes with the wanawake wanasema they're not interested in politics. When they look at it, vis-a-vis their economic situation, vis-a-vis their social situation, they suddenly do not become interested. And I think this is one of the issues that here as participants in this symposium, we should go back to the kijiji, twende huko. We have to go and do our civic duty. Discuss politics with your comrades, with your women, with your girls, so that they know there is an opportunity for them to participate. Create an interest for them. I think part of the non-interest comes from the vagaries of politics that include mudslinging, being called names, night engagement, all that. These are some of the notions that we should tweak as a community. Then, secondly, the historical. We've seen, we're talking to the youth category, and one of the things they pointed out, they do not see why affirmative action The historic perspective of why affirmative action is necessary should always be spoken to, I think, from the school level onwards to a civic engagement, so that everyone knows where we are coming from and why we are here at this point. Then, of course, lack of numbers, the registered voters. People are not going to get registered. There makes it impossible to have the proper representation of the special interest groups. Then lack of patriotism. Our nation is slowly degrading into lack of patriotism. The generation that we are going into, they do not resonate with why we have this particular right. Also, the situation in political parties also was identified it was referred to as where efforts to engage political parties to involve persons with disabilities is usually muddled by political interference, in-house discussions, negotiated democracy, all this, making it impossible for the special interest groups to get into the political parties and also into elective positions. Now, as I conclude, because these particular issues lead to disempowerment of people who are interested in politics, and because many of these candidates feel abandoned by political parties, abandoned by the society who are supposed to champion them, it is upon us as citizens, as people who have come to this symposium to discuss and come up with solutions for engagement and improving participation of special interest groups, to continuously engage in fast civic education. This is our clarion call. That is what is necessary for all of us to tuendelee na hii mapambano. We have to continue with this journey. And then I believe that when we look at the options that are there, when you look at the options that are there and the way our country has been progressing, we can see the hoops, we can see where we are coming from and the journey that we are going forward with. This is where we are supposed to learn from. And this is where we are supposed to get our ideas to the next 2027 general elections to ensure that there is more participation of women, special interest groups in elections. Asanteni.
Thank you so much, Madam Sophie, for that amazing presentation. Now it's time for questions. It's time for questions, and I'm going to humbly request you to, if you have, kuna wale wanakuanga na like burning questions, they have like 20 questions, but I request, maybe 2 questions per person, okay? So at the back, maybe we can start with you, then we have another question here. And kindly, when you're asking question, I really appreciate if maybe you can direct it to one of our panelists so that when they get that question, they can write it down so that it will be easy for them to answer. So we're going to start with the gentleman at the back, then we come here, then we go back again. So where are our microphones, kindly? And kindly, let's make our question short and brief to the point so that we save time.
My name is Tabu or W. Daniels.
Kindly raise your voice.
Not miss the mic. My name is Tabu. Are you hearing me now?
Yes, yes.
Tabu or W. Daniels is my name. I serve NAC Kenya as the executive director. I'm a member of the CMD Kenya board, and I'm the secretary general of the political parties liaison committee. Nyongesa of youth agenda. It is only fair that you share information that is correct and verifiable. The party primary is low. Actually, aboard the use of the IBC register for party primaries. Unless if you are referring to 2017, 2022, no single party used the IBC register during their party primaries. And if any did that, then the individual who was affected had a place where he or she would go for reproach. Kindly let's get that information right. You have referred to Generation Z that have IDs in their rural areas. They are in Nairobi. Seriously speaking, if they want to make an impact in the governance of the country, who is to blame? Is it the process or is it the individuals? I think it is right that we change the narrative of hearing what others are saying as opposed to what we are saying ourselves. Madam Sophie, thank you very much for standing with the women. However, what is your strategy for ensuring that the two-third gender issue becomes a thing of the past? I think we are tired. As a man who supports and who believes in women leadership, I think FIDA can do more than what is happening today. Knowing that the cost of election is prohibitive, how and why can't FIDA have women that it can work with for 5 years so that we know if we want to deliver 50 women across political divide, you identify them, you resource them for 5 years, and we shall be sure that those are 50 elected women because they will be empowered throughout the entire cycle. The John come-lately process of coming in too late and doing a conference of 3,000 women and then we are saying you have empowered women, I think we are beyond that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, sir, for that, for your questions. So we come here, or maybe we can finish behind, then he comes. Please.
Jina langu naitwa William Makusi Maina. Swali langu naelekeza kwa wale ambao wanasimamia watu ambao wanaishi na changamoto ya ulemavu. Na nikitumia mfano kule ambapo natoka kule Kamega. Wakati wa
Excuse me, Daktari says he can't hear, so maybe you can raise his microphone.
So my question inaelekezwa kwa watu ambao wanaishi na changamoto za ulemavu, wale ambao wanaakilishwa hapa. Na nimetumia mfano kule ambapo natoka, kuna baadhi ya wale ambao waliweza kuumia wakati wa kampeni zile election ambayo imeweza kumalizika hivi majuzi. Na kuna baadhi ya wale ambao pengine walikuwa kwa foleni wakitarajia pengine kupatiwa fedha ama kupatiwa pesa ile ya kampeni, wanapo pengine pangishwa foleni na wale wanasiasa. So kuna wale wawili waliweza kuvunjika mikono na wanaishi na changamoto ya kutoona, ni vipofu. Na swali langu lilikuwa baada ya wale kuweza kuumizwa waliwachwa pale na hadi sasa hawajaipata haki. So sijui sheria ipo ya kuweza kufuatilia na kuweza kuzuia watu wa aina hiyo kuweza pengine kufika kwenye campaign kwa sababu hali yao haiwezi pengine kwa ruhusu. Swali la pili ni naelekezwa kwa wale ambao wanasimamia wamasisho kuhusiana na wale ambao wanapiga kura na wale I think ni IBC. Kuna watu wengi sana kule mashinani. Mara mingi tumekuwa tukiona wakijitokeza na kusema kwamba wanaenda pengine kuhamasishwa kuhusiana na swala la kupiga kura kabla kura zenyewe ziweze pengine kufika. Lakini mara mingi watakuja pengine kama wakati umeisha, pengine imesalia wiki moja ama mbili kabla tuelekee kwa uchaguzi. Na utapata idadi kubwa ya wale ambao wanafaa pengine kuhamasishwa kuhusiana na swala la kupiga kura limeweza pengine kufeli. Na pia lina affect ama linaathiri wale ambao pia wanaishi na changamoto za ulemavu. Utapata wengi pengine washiriki kwa lile zoezi la kupiga kura kwa sababu ya ukosefu pengine wa fedha kuweza kufikisha kwenye vituo, na pengine ikiwa mwanasiasa atabeba yule mtu amweke kwenye kituo atapiga kura, lakini kurejeshwa kule nyumbani itakuwa vingumu. So sijui kama maswali yangu hao mawili, kama kuna sheria ambayo ipo na pengine inafanya kazi wapi? Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. So we're going to pick the last question and then we give them time to answer and then we can, yes, and then we'll come to you, okay? So let's have one and then two more and then that's it.
Let me stand too, for the tradition set by my predecessors. This is still Namushule, the Executive Director for Kenya. Very quick remarks. Thank you, the organizers of this symposium. But I want to remind you that you left behind one very important partner. We can't be discussing the issues of SIGs without involving the National Council for Persons with Disability. Please, let's do so in all our sittings going forward. Brother Nyongesa, I'm happy that you are not continuing with the expansion of the Book of Lamentation as a youth. It has been written too many times since the times of Prophet Jeremiah. As youth, please stop lamenting. We want to see you put your hands on the plow. Be active and show what is inside you. Demonstrate who you are, and let's appreciate you for that. So that we do not even look at you as a youth, we look at you as a leader. So applies to many other SIG groups. So build collaborations with the political parties. We have youth leagues, very vibrant, who can really help you to understand the in-house happenings and how far they are on the political issues. And that will be very good for you. Just for purposes of information building, so that you don't blunder when you comment on some national issues. Lastly, can the DPOs dealing with the disability issues, marginalized issues, come up and put what you have on the table for us as political parties? We are struggling with these people who have been pushed from the welfare bit into the competitive politics without much support in terms of transport and other facilitation. So pitiful to find that a disability participant comes to a meeting like this with the 2 or 3 helpers, but you only fund him at the level you are supporting as the able. If it is 500 shillings, you are giving him the same amount, and yet he has a person to support him. How fair is this? Let's look at this area and deal with it. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you so much. We're going to start with Dr. Ari, who's going to answer the second question, and then we go to the Executive Director for Youth Agenda.
Asante sana. Kuna maswali mawili ambayo ningependa kujibu, na nafikiri ni kuhusu uvunjaji wa sheria ambao kama tulivyoambiwa umefanyika. Pengine watu walemavu walikuwa kifanya ama walikuwa katika campaign, halafu kule kukatokea msukosuko, halafu yale mambo ambayo yamefanyika hapo. Nafikiri ni muhimu kusema na kutukumbusha sote kwamba sisi kama walemavu tunasema kwamba haifai eti tuseme kuna sheria za jinai zinazohusu walemavu halafu kuna sheria zinazohusu wananchi wengine. Ni muhimu kusema kwamba Election Offenses Act, sheria ambayo inahusu uvunjaji wa mambo ya uchaguzi, that those apply, that law should apply equally across the board. Kumaanisha kwamba kama mlemavu amekuwa katika siasa halafu kuna mambo ambayo yametukia wakati huo, swali ni nini ambavyo vile vyombo vinatakikana kulinda usalama vimefanya. And I think that's a question we should always ask ourselves. I have always been very uncomfortable with the discussion. You know, when you speak about special, inamaanisha wengine wote wakiingia katika hiki chumba kikubwa, wewe unaambiwa maana wewe ni special, enda kona fulani, halafu ukae hapo usubiri kuna mtu atakuja kukusaidia. And that can become extremely problematic. I think this conference, this session, we're speaking about inclusion. Inclusion inamaanisha kwamba sote tuko pamoja, kama ni sheria ikivunjwa sote tunashikwa, kama mtu akitufanyia makosa, anafanyia makosa watu wote alafu anashikwa pia. Now, obviously I can't discuss the specifics because I would have to know the actual detail of exactly what may have happened. One last comment I would wish to make in respect, I think, to the speaker, I think from Ford, Kenya. There's a concept, and I think we can have this discussion, and perhaps that discussion has already been had, which called reasonable accommodation. Now, the idea here is this. When I come to your meeting, your Ford Kenya meeting, assuming that you are providing a level of transport to the participants, the people who come to that meeting, the likelihood is that I will have spent more money to come to your meeting than other people. And so then, reasonably, what needs to happen is that then the political party would say, we therefore logically will spend a little money on that person who came with an assister, because obviously they had to pay for that assister to be there. And that is a concept of reasonable accommodation, which unfortunately is not as strongly established in our laws as it could be. I think we have many judicial decisions now which clarify the importance of reasonable accommodation, but I think that's a discussion which political parties need to have a little more. And my understanding is that when you look, for example, at the political parties fund, the fund which is established under that act, if you look at section 25, 26, 27, it actually anticipates that political parties may use some of the funds which they get from that, for example, for purposes of providing reasonable accommodations around issues of disability. Thank you.
Okay, let's appreciate Dr. Harry, please. Okay, so we go to Mr. Victor.
Okay, thank you. I want to respond to 3 questions, starting with the gentleman at the back. He advised me to give factual information. And I want to assure you that I tried to avoid mentioning the political party itself because I also sit as a steering committee on the election observation group, and we observed the party primaries. And I can assure you there are some of the political parties that use 2017 IEBC register. And even just seated here, there is one participant in this conference who has also SMS'd me here confirming the same. So whatever I talked about is what we were able to observe. On the issue of late civic education, I want to agree. It has been a culture in this country that we wait until it's a year to election, 8 months to election. That's the time everyone, of course, apply for certification by IEBC, and then we start doing civic education, voter education, and all that. But we forget that election is a continuous process, and this is something that needs to continue even post-election. And for me, I'll say this is a recommendation to all stakeholders here. Now that the 2022 general elections are over, and we are in that period where we are looking at what worked, what didn't work, and how do we plan for 2027. This is the period also for us to continue doing voter education out there. And especially for the Generation Z, you ask how can we engage this group? To be honest, this is a special group that will not come to complain. This is a special group that will not come to ask questions unless you ask them, how can we engage you? That's the time they will open up. And don't assume they are less informed. They are informed, but it's just that for them, they will not take that initiative to reach out to complain or ask any question. It's us to be look for other approaches on how we can engage this special group. The last question, of course, I think it was a recommendation to also think of engaging with the youth leagues. Early this year, I think it was in March, we held a political parties expo. And in that expo, we invited a representative of various political parties, youth leagues. And to be honest, some of them were open to us and they complained of some of the struggles they have in some of the political parties. It does not mean there are problems in all political parties. But still, there are those ones who are still comfortable to share that for them, they are still there to just to rubber stamp what the seniors will tell them and all that. But still, there's room for improvement. I've seen there's change. You can, if you compare now and 2017, there is change and there is improvement. And I believe we're in the right direction. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Victor, for your contribution. Now we have, we'll just take two more questions. So which one is? Oh, okay, sorry.
So the gentleman at the back asked what strategy we have on 2/3. So the strategy has been there. It's only that we are getting loopholes and learning on the way. Now what we are doing for the next 5 years, because we had a constituent that ran for the elections and lost, first of all, we are doing psychosocial support, assisting them to accept the results. So at CAM 2027, they do not lose hope. They walk the journey with us. 2027, of course, because they have experience, they can be better placed to tackle what presents itself. Then, I need to say that we have a Women Leadership Academy, a continuous academy that is focused on mentorship, capacity building. So the civic education, the capacity building that you're talking about coming very late during the elections here will not be something that us, as a women rights organization, will advocate for, because we'll be doing it continuously. Then thirdly, we continue to push the legislature, the relevant key stakeholders in the elections process to ensure that 2/3 gender rule act is put in place one way or the other, and come about with recommendations for implementation. Of course, we began very early in 2016, and we are continuing with the journey. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for that. So 2 more questions. So I think I'll take one from that table and another one from that table. I think it should be fair enough. Should I do the ladies? Because now the gentlemen have spoken. But anyway, he has really requested, you know. Okay, please, one question, and then let her take over.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kenneth Anusu, and I have not really a question, but an issue that we need to start thinking about, because it's something that has been planted into our minds during the 2022 election. And this issue is that people's minds have been set that we have a certain class in this country. We have the dynasty and the hustlers. And I see the people who are going to suffer in future are the people who are now working harder to try and better their living. And come 2050, will be called the dynasty. How are you going to sort that issue as per now? So that you don't let your children to start suffering for your hard work that you are doing now. Another thing is that we need to think about is the issues of youth versus the elderly, because it's something that is going to be a problem in this country in the near future, where during the election we are saying that all the elder people should go home and they used to remain. The question here is, how young will someone remain to be young? And what will you do when the same thing is being said to you tomorrow? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bansi Kubudha. I work for Center for Transformational Leadership in Nakuru. And I just want to reiterate the issues that we have highlighted about political parties. Since before lunch, We've talked about the situation in political parties, and Dr. here has highlighted the other problem of party lists, where political party leaders have utilized that affirmative action to reward themselves. So we see girlfriends and relatives being given those slots at the expense of really people who should be able to articulate the issues of SIGs. So my question to Dr. and perhaps also Victor could weigh in, considering that majority of members in political parties are actually SIGs, they are women, youth, and persons with disabilities. How do we begin turning the tide so that our political parties can start working for members as opposed to their leaders? Thank you.
Thank you for being brief. Okay, so we have the last...
Please, since the mic is here, just to add on what she has said, I was just wondering, also just to add on her point, how the political party ideologies can also, influence public policy, because sometimes there's that gap. What the political party promise is different with what its members are articulating within those different assemblies, whether at county assembly or at national assembly. So how can we bridge that gap so that what Ford Kenya is saying here is reflected in legislation, in public policy, in implementation, and all that? Thank you.
Thank you. So we have... Okay, one last question.
Thank you very much. My name is Rahab Kenana from Narok County. I'm also representing CCM. I was an MCA in the last elections, and my party wanted to nominate me, but I said I wanted to go for an elective position. So whatever you are talking here, I have gone through that. And I am also from the marginalized community, the Maasai community, where leadership of women political leadership is a domain for men. And I am also a professional. I've worked a lot with the NGOs, and I've also worked a lot with the community, supporting women and children. So when I went for this political position, people were actually asking me about where will you get the money. So finances for women is an issue because politics in Kenya is a time for celebration. It's a time, it's a time where we reap from our politicians. So financing is very, very important. I also stood as a woman, as a woman. I went through the processes with IEBC, and I want to say one of the things why we didn't have conflicts, IEBC during training was telling candidates that you'll be responsible in the case when conflicts come in your meeting, because each candidate was required to come up with their own timetable. So I think that one worked out very well. So my big question here is, what strategies are we putting for these special interest groups? Because politics is an aspiration. It's something, it's a journey. And sometimes, after elections, we go through mental health because people laugh at you, people look at you as a loser, and we lose, you lose the motivation to continue. Another thing on party list, unfortunately, if you go for an elective position, you cannot be nominated. And the nominations that come in are people who had no inspiration. So I'm just asking us, if we are looking at 2027, also talk to the ladies, people with disabilities, and the youth who went through, who actually contested, and also listen to their experiences, because they are the people who are actually using these processes. Then we can come up with strategies. And on the gender rule, I will really ask us, we were given a very disappointing comment the other time by one of the legislators. I think we need to revisit that. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much for that, for your comments and for your questions. So I'm going to start with Dr. Ari, maybe to answer some of the questions that has been directed to him. Thereafter, we go to Victor.
Thank you. Earlier, I spoke about good faith. So in terms of strategies, it seems to me that political parties, Ford Kenya, Jubilee, UDA, they really would need to look at themselves in the mirror hard and ask themselves, what actually does the Constitution require of us? And they will find that the Constitution requires that there should be a person with disability in the Senate, in the National Assembly, and in each county assembly. So that's the first thing. But then I do realize that good faith, if you don't then do something more, good faith doesn't work. Remember I said, in 2013 we did extremely well, kudos to us. Only 4 counties didn't comply. But now what political parties have learned is that, actually after all, it doesn't really matter. There are no consequences. And that's why then in terms of strategy number 2, we then would be saying that the IEBC needs to be empowered more in terms of law and regulation, so that at the point when the IEBC is about to gazette the list seats for Nairobi County Assembly, if it actually finds that there are no cities, then the IEBC will have a formula which enables them to go lower on the provided lists until it actually gets a candidate who has a disability. Now, the point then I would be making is that, you look at other countries, you look at the ANC, proportional representation in South Africa, and there's always representation of disabled people. So it's about culture. The final point I shall make is that as disabled people, we do recognize that we cannot sit in our rooms, wherever those are, and wait there, not participate in political parties and politics, then await to be nominated. And that's a discussion which we've been having. And in all honesty, as someone pointed out earlier, we have fairly high-profile politicians with disabilities, some of who you decided you didn't want because you had a boardroom deals. So that's part also of what we are facing. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. As we told you that we are also online, and some of the questions that have just come through is, there's one question from Suba Churchill. She calls herself Suba Churchill, and she says, for the youth and women, as indeed any interest group, to have and assert their influence, it must understand the location of political power in the political system. It determines the access points and methods of influence used by interest groups. Would the representatives of the youth and FIDA says that youth and women serving organizations appreciate where political power in Kenya's political system is located in order to influence it? So she's Suba Churchill. So that question is directed, oh, sorry, he, my sincere apologies. So, yeah, so that question is directed to FIDA and youth and the representative from of the youth. So now I'm going to Victor. Maybe you can answer that, and maybe the question that had been directed to you as you prepare for, as Madam prepare for that question again.
Okay. Before I respond to this, let me start with the first question. There was a question on political parties from working for themselves, political parties from working for themselves to working for the citizens out there. First, and probably, this is something that probably it would be good also to get the perspective from the executive director of Ford Kenya, who is within political parties. How do we change that? But just from my perspective is, if you look at most political parties in this country, some of them are owned by certain individuals. And it becomes so difficult for guys who are within political parties sometimes to hold their leaders accountable. Although the law provides room for that, but still, if you interact with most of them, sometimes, you know, you are there also to protect your position and all that. So most of them tend to run away, to shy away from holding the guys who are at the top accountable. But if we are able to do away with this narrative or this aspect of individuals owning political parties, and I'm happy today, earlier on before we went for lunch, the representative from RPP said that things have now started changing. We've seen political parties that are now not individually owned. That's the direction that we need to take. And if we are able to achieve that, trust me, even us as citizens will be, those ones who are within political parties will be very comfortable holding their leaders accountable. But still, we as citizens out here, we also need, just the way we hold county governments accountable, just the way we hold national government accountable, that's the same effort we need to channel towards our political parties. Those are public institutions, and of course, we have the power to also interact with them to find out how much how they are spending and all that. So the way we hold our other agencies, government agencies accountable, it's time we also start thinking of how do we do this for political parties. And I'm happy there are certain institutions that are doing that. We've seen even the loss of Transparency International tracking on how political parties are spending and all that. How do we also ensure that the political parties, especially those ones that are not probably in power, how do we ensure that what their manifestos or their priorities are also implemented in this country? And I'm happy, recently I had the opportunity to participate in the development of the National Action Plan 4. I think the process was being spearheaded by Treasury and Vision 2030 and all that. And at some point, I saw them engage political parties. And that's the right direction for us to take. And it's time for us also to consider on how do we also ensure that our priorities as political parties also find way into county integrated development plans. I see I'm being reminded time is not on my side, but I hope the Executive Director of Ford Kenya will also be able to give his opinion on the first question.
Okay, I don't know, Madam Sophia, you have anything to add? Okay, fine. So I think our panel has exhaustively answered all the questions that had been asked, and now it is my pleasure and it's my honor to appreciate you for being in this panel. We know your time is so precious, but you found time to be here with us and to answer some of the pertinent questions that have been raised by our members, and we are immensely, grateful that you were able to cave in some time to come and be with us. So kindly, let's appreciate them even as they take their seats. Kindly, let's appreciate them. Yes, let's appreciate them. Thank you so much, our panelists, for the amazing job that you have done. Thank you so much. Now, it's my humble request to, let's stand a bit and let's stretch for the next session. I know we're tired. Because the next session that is coming is really interesting. It's really interesting. Tunakuja kuambiwa things to do with the media, fake news and whatnot. So let's just stand and get energized for this. Please, let's stand. Let's stand. It's okay. It's just like 30 minutes and we'll be done. Okay, so let's stand and stretch a bit. Yeah, just stretch. Okay, nani hajasimama, wenye hajasimama labda hawajachoka. Let's just stretch so that, let's get energized for this next, the next topics that we're going to have. It's going to take us maybe less than even 30 minutes because I know it's a very interesting topic and the speakers who are going to come on board are full of energy. Okay, so maybe you can take our seats. Thank you so much. Let's take our seats. Thank you so much. Now, the things that we are going to discuss, yes. So what we're going to discuss is our last topic will be more of elections and media elections and media monitoring, where we're going to look at fake news, misinformation and disinformation. And also The topical area that you're going to look at is the critical analysis, the role of media with respect to coverage of the August 2022 general election, and also the impact of wave of misinformation and disinformation in Kenya, a case study of 2013 to 2022 electoral process in Kenya. So, without wasting much time, allow me to invite Rosalia Omungo, who is the Executive Director, Kenya Editors Guild. Kindly let's appreciate her even as she comes. Let's appreciate. Please appreciate someone. It will reach a point where you need to be appreciated. Hey, let's appreciate her. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, fine. So it's a change of plan, which is okay. Now, I'm going to invite Mr. Joshua Changwony, Executive Director, CRECO. Let's appreciate him as he comes. Let's appreciate them. You know, they say you clap for others when your time, until your time comes. Thank you so much, Mr. Joshua Changwony. Kindly have a seat. We have Mr. William Olo Janak, who is the chairperson, KCA. Kindly let's appreciate him as he comes. Thank you, Mr. William. And finally, we have Wanjiru Nguhi, who is the program manager, Fumbu Ake. Karibu. Let's appreciate her even as she comes. Wanjiru Nguhi. Okay. And finally, let's invite Mr. Mule Musau, who is there. Who is who? Who is the National Coordinator, Election Observation Group. Kindly let's appreciate him as he comes. Karibu, Mr. Mule. Okay, so before we go to the discussion, we have presentation. We have presentation from Madam Rosalia Omungo and Mr. Joshua Changwany. I'm going to start with Madam Rosalia Omungo, who is going to give us her presentation on our topical area, which is the critical analysis, the role of media with respect to coverage of the August 2022 general election. Karibu, Madam Rosalia.
Thank you so much, Chorono, and good afternoon. Okay, I didn't hear you. Good evening. It's evening, actually. It's 5 p.m. So thank you so much for this opportunity and for the opportunity to speak about the role of media in the general elections and role of media in the coverage and towards the general elections. So I'd start by saying that in other years, the media had been operating in silos, the media on its own, alone, and has not always been engaging with other actors ahead of the elections. But in 2022, that course changed, and we saw quite a lot of engagement with the different institutions and outside the media itself, which was a good thing because it's necessary to engage with many actors around elections, as very many actors are involved in the preparations and even the delivery of the elections. So in 2017, media attempted to do a tallying system, a tallying of elections, a tallying of the electoral results, but that also did not work because many of the the media institutions ended up doing their own work, ended up doing their own tally. So operating within themselves, and that is basically based on the fact that many different media have different technological capacity. So in 2022, in the run-up to the elections of 2022, we saw a change in that, and the media decided to do things differently by coming together as media institutions to then try to put heads together and try to put resources together to see then how they could work together. So there is an outfit called the Kenya Media Sector Working Group, which was revamped in 2021. So the Media Sector Working Group brings together about 22 media associations, and their aim basically is the same, to chart ways that would inform better operations for media, to chart ways to promote media sustainability. So this outfit has been operating in a disengaged manner, but the media associations involved came together and decided that we were going to make things work together. One moment. All right, the Media Association, the Media Sector Working Group has several institutions, and most of them are associations. The various associations, political journalists, correspondence associations, which is led by Janak. We have the Editors Guild, we have the Union of Journalists. We also have civil society groups within there. We have Internews, we also have Article 19 in there. And these groups came together to try to chart ways of how then to move together, as media. So in 2021 in March 2021, that journey towards working together began, and the media got into this business of wanting to make its position known, or wanting to make its mark known in the elections. And one of the things that we chose to do was to meet with the duty bearers, to meet with the duty bearers, to begin to engage them at an early age, early in the day, so that we would be able to have the advantage of access to information. Many times in the past, we used to look at IBC from a distance, and they call us for press conferences, and we go, and that's end of story. But we decided to change the approach. We decided to work better with the main institutions that have the mandate to bring the elections. And the first thing that we did was to do an MOU with the IBC. So the MOU was to facilitate better access to information. We formed a task force of media, of 5 media personnel who were to act as the liaison with IABC, so that then they are able to see gaps in what IABC is giving us, to see gaps for media coverage, to look at gaps for how media can be facilitated to better report on what's happening. So the main agenda for media in the electoral process, we wanted credibility and excellence in coverage of the elections, coverage and reportage of the elections. We wanted to deliver also a credible presidential debate 2022. We wanted that journalists should be accorded space to do their work in safety. So safety and security of journalists was of concern to us, as well as access to information to enable media coverage of elections. And we also wanted independence and media in securing the editorial space. All right, so we began by looking at scanning the operating environment to identify risks ahead of elections. So we mapped the hotspots, what we considered hotspots, basically areas that have in the past witnessed violence, or areas that have some very, very strong support of either candidates which have in the past been prone to violence. Then the partnership that I'm talking about with the duty bearers, it was not only with the IBC, but also with the Registrar of Political Parties and also the police. We embarked on training of journalists, and the key subjects of training involved electoral management, safety and security, and fake news and disinformation. Okay. Then dealing with fake news and information was one of the key issues on top of the agenda, because information is used against, information is always used against the perceived enemies, just to discredit them, or just to, for one candidate to endear themselves to others. Other concerns included hate broadcasts of vernacular stations especially, and we were also very, very worried of government interference with the editorial space, as well as protecting the editorial space during the debates. So some of the things that we put in place included the fact-checking desk, which was to deal with misinformation and disinformation and fake news. We also made sure that this fact-checking desk was supposed to work for the industry, work in collaboration with existing institutions, and then it was meant for sharing of the data, data for publishing by the media institutions. So on disinformation and misinformation, we noted three basic ways in which the misinformation is manipulated. So this includes imposter content. That is whereby the content is created, well-known publications with the aim of deceiving readers. So I think you must have noticed in the WhatsApp platforms, there's a lot of misinformation, especially of the front pages of the newspapers, actually manipulated to almost 99.9% of the specifications of the actual paper. But when you look closely, or when the paper gives you their own specs, there are a few things that the manipulators could not get right. So the imposter content manipulation was rife on these platforms, and the aim was really to it was photoshopping, digital cards, modifying the newspaper, the newspaper front page especially. That is what they targeted, the front page. Then there was false content, where imposters, or where the Twitter warriors of specific groups would superimpose crowds of people against a current event, so that you would think that the politician speaking is speaking to large crowds. But when fact-checked, you realize that those are different crowds altogether. Then there was also misleading content, where there was extensive manipulation of photos and videos just to suit one party or another. So those were the main key issues that were happening with on the arena of fake news and disinformation. So what were some of the interventions? So Kenya Editors Guild came up with the fact-checking desk, which was to offer industry support, and the role of this desk was to do some very, very quick some very, very quick fact-checking of the presidential debates, fact-checking of whatever content that was being posted, You know, the credentials of the candidates were being fact-checked, their university credentials, or even the schools that they went to. There were two politicians, and in fact, one university in London sent back a warning to the candidate, disassociating themselves with the candidate who had claimed that they had graduated from a certain university in the UK. So we were also fact-checking on the political rallies, and manifesto launches, the presidential debates, the debates that were raging. Remember the Nairobi gubernatorial debate and the one of the deputy presidential debates. And in fact, the fact checks that were posted, they interacted with them, they disputed them, they gave their alternative fact checks. So for fact checking, it's really a complex thing. And it really depends on what data you're using to fact check. So two fact checks can be different depending on the data that they're using. So very quickly, in conclusion, I would like to say that collaboration of media and the trainings were a great plus for the media and also in the presidential debates. The media fell short of the tallying, which was not concluded, and that was basically because of the difference in technological advancements of the industry, where they began together and then now everybody had to break away and do their own. Moving forward into because this symposium, I believe, is meant to offer solutions for the next elections. So going forward, the media industry needs to begin that journey early enough, begin that journey of preparing for the 2027 elections early enough by engaging more CSOs, engaging more duty bearers, and working at programs that would enable, better understanding of electoral data. Fact-checking, trainings on fake news, those are ongoing and must be done on a continuous basis, because if we say that we are promoting professionalism and excellence in journalism, then surely accuracy must then be the foundation of all our reports. And whenever fake news is mentioned, that means there was some inaccuracy somewhere, whether deliberate or otherwise, but there was some inaccuracy. So more trainings on fact-checking will be necessary going forward, while media needs to emulate the great example of the debates, of the joint debates, so that also the elephant in the room of the tallying system can also be done at a joint level. If the debates were done at a joint level, then a tallying can also work at a joint level. The issue of fake news must be checked. I think credibility of journalists, disruption has already occurred on social media, which is fast, and they really don't care. The so-called keyboard warriors do not have a code of ethics to adhere to. Only the law will catch up with them when somebody complains. But journalists do have the code of ethics. They must adhere to that and make sure that they verify content before posting to avoid being conduits for fake news and disinformation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Rosalia. Being a journalist, I've been a journalist for close to 10 years, and this one, Madam, she's an editor, and these editors, most of the time, we call them gatekeepers. You go to the field, umechoka, you come back, you give them a story, and then they tell you, hey, this one cannot go on here. So she is the boss, of all those editors that you see in Kenya. Anyway, we appreciate you, Madam Rosalia. Anyway, Mr. Joshua Changwan, the Executive Director, CRECO, karibu.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Moderator. And thank you so much, Rosalind, for that presentation and opening up. But I would like us to rise up, just to stretch a bit, because I know what it means by staying long in an afternoon. So it's a volunteer stretching up. Okay. Tabu is not stretching up. Okay, thank you so much, Tabu. Okay, so may we sit down? Yeah. So the presentation I'm going to make is basically based on CRECO's experience on monitoring electoral disinformation and misinformation. So you may already be aware that CRECO is a consortium of civil society organizations, and I think amongst us are members of CRECO from different parts of the country. Maybe they can just wave from wherever they are. CRECO members, you can just, I know, okay. So this will be a combination of the work that we've all been doing from different parts of our country. And also members of the civil society, as well as also the media, because we partnered with them, including institutions of government. And I want to give an introduction that there's been communication revolution. This subject is very complex. Complex in the sense that I think Madam here, editor, has also said that it's a very complex subject. Debunking, tracking, and talking about disinformation and all these things. But I think a background will do us justice because this is a symposium. And I think I was looking at the definition of a symposium, Janak and Mule. It means a discussion on a particular subject and the sharing of experiences. So, and I think that is what we want to do on this particular subject. So if you will hear me defining certain words, it is just for the sake of all of us. Because even us, we had also to study this. So there's been communication revolutions. You know, the way we were told on our writing until all of us became writers in terms of stories. And then, do we still anymore do that? So it's part of the revolution. And I think we are in an era where there is a computer information revolution, whereby we have now discussions around data security. And even before we talk about data security, all of us in one way or another, we wear a computer device, either in form of a watch, a phone, and many other. I'm told even there are earrings which are computerized. Yeah? So things have changed. So people store data in different forms, including our ATM cards, our Visa cards, our fuel card, I don't know, all sorts of cards. So that is data. It's about you. And of course, connecting it to yourself involves things such as passwords. You to remember a certain identity that defines and connects with you because you are using gadgets. So that is the world we are in. But there is someone called Mark Twain who said, a lie can travel halfway around the world while the truth is putting on its shoes. Wakati unavaa viatu, uongo, wakati inatembea, wakati unamaliza kuvaa kiatu, itakuwa imefikia kila mahali. And this, what this man is just saying, is that never has this been more the case than in the current environment, where social media can spread unverified story globally within seconds. Just within seconds. And it just goes like that. Everybody just gets. And there is data, latest being November 2022, which is last month, where 12 million Kenyans are Facebook users. 2.5 of them are very active on Instagram. 1.3 million are Twitter users. 9.3 million are YouTube users. And over 11 million are Facebook Messenger users. And then there is 2.9 LinkedIn and 1.7 million Snapchat users. There's something called Snapchat. And now I was trying to look for what is called the TikTok users. I could not even find. But I'm told that is now what Nyongeza was calling the generation what? C. They are more there, And it was, and of course cumulatively, people who use the internet in our country are 22.86 million. And this is latest in November 2022. So it means that is the space where we occupy. So if we are still thinking about the chief's baraza in the village, I think that one, we would be told 10 years ago, that was really very useful. Nowadays, the chief has a WhatsApp group of the sub-location. And you just post a message. And I'm quite sure Tabu there has also a WhatsApp group for NAC Kenya, where you have all your members there. And you can easily post a communication and it reaches everywhere in the country. I mean, it's an hypothesis, but I'm just thinking that probably that is the advance we have gone in. But allow me single out 5 items which I want us to interact with. And I'm so sorry this is happening when it is late afternoon, but we'll try our best. And I'll try not so much to be very boring because this subject can be very technical. There's something called malinformation. You heard the editor using that word? Malinformation. There is disinformation. There is misinformation. There is fake news. And there is hate speech. Those are words that are being used. But I want to invite my colleague Tim to just play a video. And I will want to call these, I know, mood me and the choir. So, Tim, if you may just in 30 seconds, play the choir. Are we there?
Katika. 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 Shangilia Yesu atupenda. Yesu atupenda. Yesu atupenda. Yesu atupenda. Shangilia Yesu atupenda kweli. Yesu atupenda. Oh, Yesu atupenda. Yesu atupenda. Shangilia Yesu anaweza. Yesu anaweza. Yesu anaweza. Yesu anaweza. Shangilia Yesu anaweza kweli. Yesu anaweza. Yesu anaweza. Yesu anaweza. Cheza 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 cheza.
Kila mtu atauchukua mzigo wake mwenyewe, na kila mtu atatoa habari zake mwenyewe mbele za
All these illustrations that are How many of you saw the last video yesterday? How many of you saw in your... Okay, you saw it. So, this one of Kila Mtu Atachukua Mzigo Yake, do you think that song is well intentioned with that, I mean the movement of the people who are there? Is it in good faith? It's mockery, yeah? But when you go to Facebook pages of our leading leaders in this country, that is what they have uploaded. Yeah, just do a scheme, you'll find out of 10, at least 3 of them have uploaded that in their Facebook page. And I want to be very current in this. Tim, you'll go to my presentation, please. So I will want to ask specific things around the choir that you said that was in Bomas. And I want to read this. The Muungano choir helped to maintain peace at the Bomas of Kenya during the tallying of presidential election results in August 2022. Is that a message you can connect or you'll doubt it? You'll doubt it or you'll agree? Huh? You'll agree with it, isn't it? Okay. Now, if there was no Muungano choir at the Bomas of Kenya during the tallying of presidential election results, there would have been violence and death at the National Tallying Center. Do you agree or you don't agree? Okay. Let me read the last one. Let me read the last one. The Muungano Choir at the Bomas of Kenya entertained the present observers and election officials at the Bomas of Kenya. Do you agree with that or you disagree? What? Okay. Now, I want to ask. Maybe you will just continue projecting my presentation there. We will arrive at that, and these are deliberate statements because that is what Kenyans said, including worse ones that the choir was being used to make people not to be alert and facilitating the theft of what you know those things. Now, there is something which is called malinformation. And this is something that is eating us up. It is based on reality, but used to inflict harm on a person, organization, or a country. And we are seeing that in Ukraine and Russia currently. We've also seen the son of a president of a neighboring country. How many of you have ever heard of that thing? You've heard of that? Okay. Examples are, there are quite a number of them. There's something which is called phishing. And phishing is not the one that you get samaki here. It is an attack at stealing personal data. And I'll be giving examples such as the current Nairobi governor. You know what he underwent, including his academic documents being around. So, are you aware of that? So, where there were people who deliberately went out to get those things, isn't it? Do you think he's the one who facilitated the getting of the acquiring of those documents? Then there's something which is called catfishing, where you lure someone into a relationship by means of a fictional online persona to compromise a victim in some way for wish fulfillment. And we've seen this with our politicians. We had a presidential candidate who killed his ambition because of some findings and wherever, and also some members of parliament. We have this data. Then there's something which is called doxing, where somebody searches for your information and they publish this, where they try to get your information with malicious content. So when during the elections, when we were monitoring this, we found out that opponents of a particular candidate would jeopardize the image and stature of a particular candidate using what is called malinformation. I don't know whether you saw information around the former governor of Nairobi, and I think also a women rep and whatever, something like that. You saw those things? I mean, they are funny. Then there is also what's called revenge porn. And I think I'll be discussing later on how even things that you take with the friends in good faith can also serve as, let's say, after 10 years in 2027, including also naked feed videos and photos. And they resurface during election period. Now, I want you to project the next video, team, as I wind up. That will be interesting.
Okay, Goshine. Give me a check out here. Jesus evermore. Onge no. Le pichuni. Kowa kona iko le kisire asubuhi. Okay, Goshine. Give me a check out here. Tameja somo. Onge no le pichuni. Kowa kona iko le kisire asubuhi. Kwa mu kowa kona iko le kisire asubuhi. Kumeche ko abusnatet. Nyokonde ngalek nya ko le kakile meche cho meche jun ko pamphlets ko ne lakini amecha moyo moyan ngalecha Kimeche kalia ak biik tugul. Pirwech biikab komoswek tugul. The people from Western Kenya who are here. The people from Nyanza who are here. The people from Central who are here. Shame on you.
Language, whether it resonates with the translations there. So there's someone who really just sat down, got information from different places, pieced them together, and did all those things. Then, so with this information, it is false or inaccurate information deliberately spread, such as that one. But there's something that now, let's say for instance, somebody who was not there, but has never seen this candidate is saying shame on you. And then out of just ignorance, anatuma kwa mwingine. Sasa yeye ajui, hata ajui effects itakuwa nini, anasema tu waje nini, nitume. So that becomes misinformation. You do not have intention to injure that other person, but wewe tu umetuma just because it's either very exciting or it's very enticing or whatever, something like that. Then fake news, I think Madam Editor here had mentioned about that. But hate speech, where people use public speech to express hate or encourage violence. Do you remember when the Right Honorable Raila Odinga was in a burial in Gishu, and of a farmer, a prominent farmer, and then his chopper was stoned. You remember that? And then there was information that the 14 youth who stoned that chopper were not locals. They were people who were brought from Kondele. You remember that kind of thing? And it forced the police to release the list of the arrested 14, and the names were just locals, isn't it? And then at that time, they said because the people who had hosted Raila included the former ambassador of Kenya to Australia, I think Honorable Tarus, his home had been banned in Nandi. And it forced the police to get a contingent of police officers all the way from Eldoret to Nandi. So, you know, this is now the damage this thing can do. But when they reached there, there was nothing that had happened to the house. Sawa. Then the last bit is, I don't want to go to those examples, but I think it would be good we become Karen. There's a well-known civil society actor. She calls herself Active Citizen. She's now vying during the by-election in Elgeyo Marakwet. You can go to that team. And because she was very active in Linda Katiba movement, she's called Cherotich Sei. And you know how active she was in the BBI and, you know, going to court and all those things. Now, because she was interested in that senatorial position, people resurfaced her photos with the former prime minister, and they say this is an Azimio. So you see how damageful these things can. It was, I mean, ancient photos, I mean, photos of some years back when probably they were championing for something else. When you know that Raila really has worked very closely with civil society in many aspects, including constitutional reforms. He's not a stranger. But what did we do before, during, and post the elections of 2022? And I know, Mule, you'll compliment my presentation because we've worked together, and I wish Baraza Media Lab was also here. So we used to track, fact-check, debunk, and document all cases of electoral disinformation and misinformation. During the elections, even we had a WhatsApp number. And I think IEBC was gracious enough to give us a commissioner. Anything that probably we felt was cheating the public and revolved around IEBC, we would call direct and ask whether that information is true and disseminate the same to Kenyans. So it's another form of civic education to say this is true and this is not true. Then we also created awareness among civil society members, and we also trained the journalists on how to, you know, identify these fake news, including sources. And you know, disinformers and misinformers can also be people who can give false narratives to a particular. You remember John Gidongo withdrawing his affidavit and he said that there's somebody who was planted to come and tell me false things. If you remember that time during the presidential petition in the Supreme Court. Then Faith, I'm almost winding up. I don't want to be. I don't want to be rude. I want to say that disinformation, misinformation, and malinformation affects everybody. And everybody who is not well prepared for this subject is also a spreader of disinformation and misinformation, including the media, which is also a victim, including everybody. And disinformation or malinformation can also be designed by people who will agree that let's release this type of message. And then now sometimes it can be worse where there is no awareness about it. And I've deliberately done that awareness today. And then digital security, including passwords and literacy training, is also necessary for us to survive in this era of disinformation and malinformation. Then I think the way we used not to have social media and communication desk officers in our organizations, I think we are now heading to have disinformation and misinformation officers in our organizations. Their job, including, you can give me the example where FIDA Kenya, I think there was an officer from FIDA Kenya, and 3 other organizations, fake or disinformers organized a meeting such as this in a hotel here in Nairobi and mobilized the people that FIDA has invited you for a particular function. The hotel was not aware, FIDA was not aware, and the other 2 partners, they were not aware. And they had to debunk by saying this is fake. But people have traveled to the venue only to realize that this is a fake activity, it's not even there. Then what I would recommend is that I think as actors we need to champion what is called online code of conduct. I think our discipline online is just on another level. The way someone talks physically, the way I'm doing, is so different from the way I express myself from the keyboard. True or false? There are people who are very courageous on phone, kwa groups. Very courageous. But when you meet the person physically, you cannot believe this is the person who writes those. Whether in Facebook, Twitter, and all those things. Then the last bit, I think now we need to reevaluate values-based freedom of expression. There are things really, we would want to call them freedom of expression, but truly I think we are misusing freedom of expression. Then I think, Faith, you will allow me 20 minutes video of Sudi, if you don't mind. As, no, 20 seconds, sorry. 20 seconds. Team, please. I think videos really educate people.
Iyo kakoma. Matinga kisas puroriet. Komesas kando iti taburiet. Arabruto marabruto makapsa mo eme jay ne ngeteran yamo. Arabruto ko kando iti taburiet korok asige bas ni bagenya. Ngalal ngalegu kama jay ngalal ngalegu pia pimu ngalega moe ngungiu lakini metu arabruto. Metu aibisha au metu aibisha sa.
I was just reading whatever that was being said there, that had been written, and I was shocked. Anyway, so without wasting much time, allow me to invite Mr. Mule Musau, who is the National Coordinator for Election Observation Group, to give us his remarks. Thank you.
Okay, no, because I'm just a discussant, Joshua has actually discussed or presented the issue that you're supposed to discuss. I'm an election observer, and my work is just to observe the election observation, the electoral process. As far as one of our thematic areas is the area of media monitoring, where our work is to ensure that we track, am I obstructing anything? I'm okay? Okay. Where we're supposed to be tracking how the media is covering the electoral processes themselves, in terms of how it also is covering the actors and especially the aspirants who participate in the elections, how they are conducting voter education, because you want the voters in all over the country to be able to understand the processes, understand who the candidates are, understand what the issues are, and what the agenda that is being perpetrated or being shared by politicians is. And then you also mind the way in which they carry this information. And on the basis of that, our findings were very clear. When we started off and we had a very long-term monitoring of the media, our major focus area was the mainstream media, where the print media is concerned, where the electronic media is concerned, where the community radio stations are concerned, because based on our reports in 2017, especially the community radio stations, there was a lot of spewing of hate speech and fake information which was being spread using vernacular languages. That was in 2017. Our major finding in this 2022 electoral process is that it is the other space that Joshua is talking about, which is the social media and the digital spaces, where all the problems associated with media, especially in terms of adverse coverage, misinformation, disinformation, fake news, and hate speech are concerned. That's where we found evidence, overwhelming evidence of this. One of the things that, of course, the converse means that if you look at the traditional media, and we have to give them kudos for this, because the traditional media, the print media, electronic media, main radio stations, TV stations, they tried their level best to address the question of hate speech, fake news, and other things which were coming through them. We only found, the only big issue we actually found in this was the skewed coverage, especially of the main candidates. If you look at the for instance, four presidential candidates, both Ruto and Raila were getting more than 90% of the coverage everywhere. Wajakoya and his colleague Mwaure walikuwa napata ile ingine ambayo imebaki. So they were sharing the others. But they also, the coverage also, it was also skewed in terms of the special interest groups, the women, so that it is again the male candidate or the male aspirants who are getting much more coverage in their respective races than the others. So that was a major finding, and that's the only big adverse issue that we found with mainstream media. Otherwise, when it comes to the question of disinformation, misinformation, they actually had put in place mechanisms to support it, even in terms of debunking. Some of the stations had built-in mechanisms to be able to ensure that misinformation was detected, disinformation was detected, and that was a very good finding. The big problem, which is what I think we all need to start discussing, even moving forward, is the question of what to do with the digital space, because that's where all the problems are coming from, and these indications, the illustrations that Joshua has shared here, are just a tip of the iceberg. What is going on even daily lives of your own life and how that can be affected by the misinformation, how our activities, our processes, even government information can be distorted by the digital space, is something that we all need to really put up our heads about and think about how we're going to deal with it. Our proposals are that we start with the regulators, the Communications Authority of Kenya, and the other actors who are involved, including the media themselves, to take up action and see what kind of frameworks can we be able to make a proposal in terms of regulating the digital space. And we need to hit hard even to the owners of the social media. And I think you've heard about Elon Musk and the takeover of Twitter. Was it Twitter or TikTok? Twitter, which is also eliciting so many issues, even as we speak, that we are seeing suddenly the increase of hate speech. He has allowed some people who had been barred from those platforms because of the kind of utterances they were having, and now they are back. So I think my 2 cents on this is that Kenyans, this is a space that we need to start putting our heads together about moving forward. So the different stakeholders who are here, because you all going to be affected in one way or the other, this is something that we all have to tackle directly and very robustly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir, for your comments and your remarks. So I'm going to welcome Mr. William Olo Janak, who is the chairperson of KCA, to come and give his presentation. Thank you.
See, they have finished everything. Do I need to talk, actually? Okay. Let me say a few things. They have talked about hate speech and so on. I'll get back to the legacy, what we call the legacy media, the media as you have known it previously. But let me ask you a question. How many of you today bought newspapers? Carry up your hand if you bought a newspaper. I'll advise the 6 newspapers in Kenya to close, because in this hall there are no customers. How many watch TV in the morning? How many listened to the radio? Okay. Now, the reality is that the media landscape as we know it is changing. And therefore, the influence of the legacy media, the media as we have always known it, is increasingly being challenged by what our colleagues have talked about. And you heard Joshua talk about the figures. And please know that during the elections, major political parties ignored the legacy media and set up their own, so that journalists who are based in different countries, if you are filing a story from Kisii or from Kituyu, from wherever where the major candidates were, they'll tell you, no, we have followed it on ODM online, we have followed it on UDA online, we have looked at what Itumbi is posting. See that, eh? They ignored until some of the journalists became irrelevant. That is how quickly it is changing. Now, let me tell you some piece of news. Next week, all the TV stations will be shut for a week. Next week. A few of us are organizing protests. Who will join us? You people who are here, how many can come with us to the street to protest the shutdown of TV stations next week for 1 week? How many? You see, the media has no support. Of course, there will be no shutdown. I'm trying to tell you that there can be, that can be. Of course, I'm choosing to deliberately mislead you, But what I'm saying is, okay, in terms of talking about the media, I think Musawa has talked about, many of you know that the media worked under very difficult circumstances, and my colleague here, Rosalio Mungo, we are together in what is called the Kenya Media Sector Working Group. It's a platform to bring media stakeholders together. We tried what we could to, discuss with media stakeholders as such, IBC, the civil society, political parties, all the actors. We tried to do that. Perhaps I need to tell you that in our engagement with EC, we noticed some of the problems that eventually you saw at Bomas, because we had meetings with them, and I saw that, if you looked at it through, it was clear that the sense of unity within the commission was lacking. The issues of technology were apparent, because even media people, journalists are supposed to be accredited. The systems for accrediting journalists collapsed for several days. And when I raised it, we were in Diani, then, I got, of course, information about the challenges and attacks to that technological system. So eventually when we saw some of those things happening, and the whole discussion about technology that we had here yesterday, I think the question of technology and whether we can wholly rely on it, and if we are not honest, about the use of technology. I mean, why would you expect IBC and the other players to be, to have good faith in the use of technology when you yourselves, since morning, how many tweets have you sent or WhatsApp messages which you have forwarded which are wrong? So you are using technology, even now. Huh? So I can see people on technology there. What messages are you sending out? Okay? Yeah, so going forward, I want to say that there are challenges to the media sector, and this will remain. There were perceived biases that we saw, and you saw different candidates, of course, blamed different media. In other countries, the US and other countries in the West, media are allowed to take positions. But in a delicate environment like Kenya, it becomes extremely difficult for any media to take up positions because first we have ethnicity. And ethnicity, even media ownership is tied to certain ethnic compositions, isn't it? Yeah. So you will find that while in the US, Fox News, CNN, and all the others take certain positions very robustly and say, okay, fine. For us, we are supporting candidate X or the other. In most developing countries, and Kenya included, we cannot afford to do that because we identify media, the media ownership, with certain ethnic groups, with certain candidates. And therefore, when we look at that, part of the challenge that we have for the media sector now is regime change. Regime change affects the media sector. In 2013, what were we told? Gazeti ni ya? Gazeti ni ya kufunga? What does that mean? Is that why we publish the newspapers? So when it is said gazeti ni ya kufunga nyama, what does it mean? Useless. And it was even said they don't even read it. Okay? Now, that was in 2013. We had a regime change in 2013. And the regime went for 10 years. Now we have another regime change. Have you seen the kind of changes happening? Have you seen the media landscape changing, even in terms of appointing new people? Have you noticed? It's a regime change issue. Because even the media must align to survive. So you will see a lot of changes. Because there were those people who are pointed out, so there is pressure on the media sector to try to change, and possibly everybody, right now if you look at it, people are working towards being compliant. Will you survive in the next dispensation? And you will see the business community. Atwali is complying, isn't it? Have you seen Atwali trying to comply? Yeah, and changing his story. So why wouldn't the media comply? Because the government is the biggest advertiser with a 9 billion budget for the media. Yesterday, I think was it yesterday, the other day, the ICT minister said that he will release 1 billion Kenya shillings that has been held. Advertisement to the media, but then they have not been paid. So the media has laid off a number of staff. The laying off of staff affected the elections because some of the most experienced journalists were laid off during Corona. And even then, even now, there's a lot of laying off of staff. So I don't want to take a lot of time. I just wanted to say that increasingly, the media as we knew it is changing. Between now and 2027, there will be significant changes in the media landscape, and it may not necessarily change in a manner that can help us maintain or nurture the democracy that we want, or to help us deal with the civic space in terms of opening up the civic space. So the other thing is that my colleague has talked about the training of journalists. This training is going on, especially on fake news and misinformation. Even us at KCA, we are doing that because there was a lot of disinformation around that time. And then I also wanted to indicate that around election period, journalists are under a lot of, attacks. We have just released a report where 34 journalists were actually actively under attack: intimidation, arrests, physical injury, destroyed of equipment, and among them 11 female journalists. Some of them were sexually harassed, even by security agencies. So we are talking about an electoral environment, because we are talking about elections here. We're talking about an electoral environment which presented challenge to many other people. And therefore, when journalists work in such an environment, it becomes extremely difficult. So I'm saying, therefore, in the post-election period, that as I go towards the conclusion, we have the pressure on the media. We have media ownership, which is essentially political. The owners of media in this country are politicians, either directly or through shareholders and their wives. And then we have also the question of COVID affecting the media and the withholding of advertising revenue, by the government. So this all affect the media space. Yeah, so let me say in conclusion that you people need to make a decision about whether or not the legacy media will continue to play its important role that it has played in the past, because technology has disrupted the media space so that with one tweet by a lie or somebody else, you will find that it can reach more than 500,000 people, more than even the 6 newspapers that we have daily. And you saw the surprise here when I said, who has read the newspaper? Circulations are going down. So do we still need to publish? There is a challenge there. So I want to thank the organizers here and say that I think we need to have more conversations about this, but I also challenge you to understand the media landscape, because it's important if you want to engage with the media, including the political parties. We have recommendations about what political parties did. Some of them did the wrong things, even for media people. So I think we'll continue engaging. We'll also share information about what we think from the media side that needs to be taken on board in terms of making the situation better.
Okay, let's appreciate him. Let's appreciate him. Thank you so much. I know you are very tired, but you are coming. We're just about to come to the end of this very, very important day. I don't know, it's time for questions. I don't know who has a question to any of our panelists. If there's any question, maybe you can raise your hand. Is there anyone with a question? Okay, so we have one question here. Do you have any other question? Yes, and then we have another question here. Thank you so much. So we'll start with the gentleman there, and then to the lady.
Okay. Thank you very much for the presentations. I just have 3 questions in terms of what is happening in the media. There's been commercialization of misinformation and disinformation. I think that is really creeping up into our politics. In the Jubilee campaign employed a national PR company in the name of Cambridge Analytica, which conducted a lot of disinformation across all the media, both traditional and online. So how do we really come and tackle these multinational companies who have commercialized misinformation and disinformation as a way of making money for themselves? Number 2, there's the advent of artificial intelligence. There's a crop up of deep fakes being created, shared online, and really losing people online, cheating people on what is real and what is fake. So how do we really get at the bottom of handling deep fakes as a civil society? Then finally, the role of multinational companies. How do we get to regulate multinational companies such as Facebook and Twitter locally so that they can help in regulating misinformation and disinformation? Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. So maybe you can transfer the microphone to the lady. Thank you.
Thank you so much for all of us. My question here is to the media. I've been working in the ASL areas for some times, for almost 10 years. I'm not known to the media, but I have somehow interacted with them, and they have disqualified me because the story that I wanted to do that time was a sensitive story, which was quite true. So why couldn't the media be trusted because they don't want to carry some of the part of the news when you come to them, and they're being selective instead of, you see, doing what is supposed to be done. That is number 1. Number 2, they are biased. The reason why I say they are biased, I'm not abusive, but I'm saying that those marginalized areas, when during the time of election, there are many killings and there are many conflicts clashes between the clans. Many women lost their lives, and there is nothing of that sort of in the media. We were trying to sometimes carry some food relief to those areas. The police posts are there. We have a lot of challenges because the media aren't present there for us to report back to the society. Because I know that when you report to the society will see on the television, and they will know what is happening from the other side of Kenya. People call themselves in the marginalized area that they are not part and parcel of Kenya. Why? Because number one, in the immigration status, they have a difficult during the election time. That's the only time that they are asked to come, all of them forward by the politicians. And those children who are 18 and above, they try not to involve themselves and engage themselves with the politician because they have that misunderstanding and lack of trust in between them. So my question to the media is that those youth who doesn't have all this kind of like citizenship, IDs and passport, whatever, and they have the right to, this is the basic needs for anybody, why can they come and, you see, cover those areas whereby they start challenges before the time of the election? Why is it so important when it is time for election? Last but not the least, marginalized areas are places whereby they have been deprived from their basic needs. When you reach to those societies, you will see that coming from Nairobi and going to that end, it is completely very different generations. Here we have schools, we have water, we have shelter, but when you go to the other side, even elephant can eat you and there is no reporter there. Can you be present there without making any recommendation, any, what do we call, any like making it as an excuse? Thank you so much.
Okay, so maybe I'm going to, those two questions, I'm going to ask Madam Rosalia to answer issues in regards to the media, and then maybe someone else can.
All right, thank you for your question. The one about bias on marginalized areas and biased coverage of marginalized areas and heightened coverage, especially towards election, and its basic coverage of negativity, clashes. Yes, so media houses have their policies. Media houses have policies, and sometimes there is a lot of competition for the sort of coverage that goes on, especially when elections are around the corner, because they want to maximize on where the money is. But that said, we all know that when bad news sells and good news doesn't always sell. That's how media works. When a man bites a dog, that's news. But when a dog bites a man, that's not necessary, because it's regular. But that is not to say that media houses need to do some equity coverage. I think one of the ways in which we can tackle that is by giving media houses the necessary information. Sometimes they just lack the information. Sometimes they don't have somebody there to go cover, so that when such an incident occurs, they will be sending a reporter aboard a police chopper to go land there in the extremely interior area. Sometimes they just don't have somebody there, but they should make the effort to make coverage for, because when you call yourself a national media and an event like that occurs and you cannot treat them, then it is disservice to the people. Media is supposed to operate in public interests. So one, it's important for citizens to supply that information to media. And now that disruption has taken place, most of this information is first relayed on social media, thanks to social media. We first get to hear about it in social media through mobile phone video, and then that's when it escalates. So disruption has happened, and therefore it sort of like alleviates that burden from the locals in the marginalized areas. So I think that is one of the ways in which we can foster more coverage by doing the citizen journalism, that when such events occur, citizens can also help to escalate the matter, because resources are dipping, revenues are dipping in media, and sometimes it's just difficult for them to reach there. Then you had the question about, there was the question about the role of multinational companies in regulating information. I think a few days before the elections, there was an issue, some misreportage of an issue about shutting down of Facebook in Kenya, just a few days before elections. I don't know if you heard that one, a few days before elections. I think the idea here, and what the then ICT minister wanted, was to ask this big tech to be able to pay for the money, to be able to pay a percentage of what they get from advertising revenue to the various people that advertise, because everyone is fully utilizing the space. They are getting money, Facebook is getting money, but that does not translate to revenue for the advertisers. So those are the things that the government has been pushing for some advertising revenue from the big tech. And even media houses have been pushing for such, because they utilize that space and plenty of money comes, but the whole chunk of it goes to the big tech. Okay. I want to pass.
I don't think there was any question that was directed to me. Let me save time by not.
I'll just add to the media. Madam, you said you come from marginalized areas, and I know quite a number of our colleagues. How many supermarkets are there in the marginalized areas? Are there any supermarkets? No, don't worry. I mean, I'm asking a rhetorical question. The point I'm driving, or certain areas of this country, Safaricom, Airtel, they have not erected the kind of infrastructure to help you make the telephone calls. People still climb on a hill or some tree. I'm talking about the nature of our country. A capitalist country with zero values for, just direct service to citizens. Even the government who we elect and has the responsibility to give services across the country doesn't do this. Now, these are private companies to a large extent. Media is private. The bad news is that media is private company like the Safaricom, Airtel, and also, so you will find that they invest only where, including personnel, where they think there will be returns. That has been the unfortunate thing. So I just wanted to deliver, let us lower our expectations about the media, because the media is not charity. The media does not do charitable work like Red Cross or any other thing. They are in business. So where business doesn't make sense, they will not even post anybody. I may need to invite you to be thinking about what are the alternative channels for communication. If, for example, locally you can have the chief and other people setting up Facebook, you probably we need to invest in those alternatives. And I've already said that the media is shrinking, so it will even shrink further.
I'll just speak to the one issue that I had from Ian. I never had the other questions, but the question on those Cambridge Analytica and others. I think, like I said in my submission, we are entering a very dangerous space, and we are going to have to guard it. There are three things that you have to do in this regard. Number one is that government has to wake up to and smell the coffee in terms of the new reality of the digital space, and therefore, together with other experts, be able to formulate a framework for regulating these spaces. The second thing is that lazima kutakuwa na hamasisho thabiti kwa wananchi, because they're the ones, remember at independence, we were supposed to be dealing with the issue of ugonjwa, umaskini na ujinga. Hiyo ujinga imeanza kurudi tena. Kwa sababu sasa we are in a new environment, and we have been made to look very stupid by this new environment. So we need to revisit that hamasisho or that education so they can be able to deal with the public. The third is a question, and I'll put it like a rhetorical question the way he was asking. Kenyans have to start asking themselves about the role of private entities in our affairs. Remember, private entities are interested in profit. Hawa wana shughuli yoyote na uchaguzi wenu, Safaricom inataka tu pesa zake ziingie. I asked somebody today, one of the online virtual participants, who was asking me asking us, why are we not doing mobile voting? Are we not should we not go to mobile technology? And I said, if Safaricom today told you how many transactions za M-Pesa zinaendanga fiongo, zile zinaendaga vibaya, alafu anakulipa na pesa kutoka insurance, si zile ati pesa zako umetuma, unatuma 100 yako inaenda 100, lakini kipotea na kwa Safaricom they have insurance, because they're interested in profit. They'll not tell you about those losses. Imagine that was happening with our votes. That would not be the story. We have no insurance for votes. Bottom line allows them to come up with mechanisms to support themselves. So we have to think very hard about the role that private actors, Cambridge Analytica, Safaricom, Airtel, and others, they play in our public-driven processes. So it's an interrogation that we must ask, and a dialogue that Kenyans must have. Ndio waweke parameters.
Okay, so thank you so much, our panelists. Let's appreciate them, please, our panelists, for unpacking the critical analysis and the role of media with respect to coverage of the August 2022 general elections, and also the impact of wave of misinformation and disinformation in Kenya, a case study of 2013 to 2022 electoral processes in Kenya. So,
I have a question to the guy who was doing the presentation on misinformation. Currently, we have the situation of the digital network, to the extent that our former president left the Twitter account because of some issues with our KOT, our big KOT, who are helping us in fighting the social media fight or something. So my question is, most misinformation given now by either Twitter or Facebook, and they are done by youth, the Kenya youth, which means that in most cases, a higher percentage of our youth are involved in the digital space, but in the wrong way. I believe in all the videos you showed, most of them, the translation and the real content of the message were totally different. So what are the strategies that the Kenya government or even the civil society are implementing to protect any person from being attacked on the social media or misinformed or giving misinformation as per the Kenya Communication Authority? And the second thing, which strategy do Kenya Communication Authority give, or guidelines do they give to the social media platforms that operate in Kenya, especially Twitter and Facebook? Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. So,
okay, sorry to have also come here, because I know people are really very tired. But thanks for your question. I really appreciate. So I think the lady is from Mandera, if I'm not wrong. Let me also tell you, the government is also a victim of disinformation, and he's also an architect and also spreader of disinformation. We saw that in the BBI. We saw that, including what they did to our MCS to rally behind what? BBI. It's only 3 county assemblies who coded right. The others received the vehicles, isn't it? Because they were put on the box that all was well and it was in line with the constitution. Now, we cannot blame the youth. Our finding is that we have even professors who are hired to spread disinformation. And they buy a whole page of a newspaper to foster an opinion through an article. And when you read the article, you just see there is disinformation here. And there are popular names that we have in our country. And they are agenda setters. And I think somebody was saying that disinformation and disinformation has now become a lucrative venture of where people make an investment, including, let me tell you, including buying certain applications. Let me tell you, a youth who is in that deep Nandi village, translating that Kalenjin vernacular by that politician, does not have that application to manipulate the video and say that nyinyi ni what? Washenzi ama nyinyi ni kumbafu. There is a certain application that is used to manipulate. You see that this is really real. So it is an investment. And I think I summed up to say it's about discipline of Kenyans and having an online code of conduct where we educate ourselves. I think Mula was putting it very well to say, I think sasa ile ujinga imeanza kurudi. Because you don't know the kind of the harm that we are causing to our society. And this is now what we are preaching. You know the way we were saying you have a right, haki yetu. Now we are reaching a situation where we are saying now, be aware of disinformation. Don't consume information before you verify, you fact check, and look even at the source of that information. And I think this is a conversation that we need to advance even in future conferences and convenings that we are going to have at the national level and at the county level. And let's be ambassadors of creating awareness of disinformation, malinformation, and disinformation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Joshua, for that comment. Now, allow me to invite Mr. Marcus to come and give us, the next direction.
Thank you, Faith. I just have one announcement to the technical committee. We have a short debrief meeting at our office there, just for about 10 minutes, then we go. Then I'll hand over back to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Marcus. So at this point, allow me to welcome Mr. Rono to give us a vote of thanks and maybe his remarks to all of you. Welcome, Mr. Rono.
Jambo. Good evening. I know you are tired, and I don't want to take much of your time, and I know some of you are going far away in this city, and those who will be traveling. First of all, I want to move for vote of thanks, specifically to the organizers and the secretariat, the partners who sponsored these symposiums, and also the panelists, the discussants, those who donated their time and also to come and discuss these issues here. The participants, you who make this workshop successful. I thank also the moderators who have been entertaining us and also giving us energizers. I thank each one of you, that is participant, for at least availing your time to come for these 2 days symposium. And on behalf of the leadership of ELOC, that is the top leadership, we thank you. And we report that the report of this symposium is being finalized, and it will be sent to you through your emails. I think each one of you written emails in your registration forms. So it will be sent to you, all the reports, all the discussion we have discussed here from the panelists. You are going to get all the reports through our secretariat. And I don't want to take much, members. I want to say that we officially declare this workshop closed. Thank you very much. May God bless you. I've journey masses to your homes. Well, those who are traveling today, those who are traveling tomorrow, we wish you the best. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Aruna. Tunataka kusema asante sana kwa kila mmoja wenu ambao you joined us, and we really appreciate you for your time and everything. So please let's rise as we sing the East Africa anthem. Yes, East Africa anthem.
Ee Mungu twaomba uilinde Jumuiya Afrika Mashariki, tuwezeshe kuishi kwa amani, tutimize na malengo yetu. Jumuiya yetu sote tuilinde, tuwajibike, tuimarike, umoja wetu ni nguzo yetu, idumu jumuiya yetu. Uzalendo pia mshikamano iwe msingi wa umoja wetu, na tulinde uhuru na amani, mila zetu na desturi zetu. Jumuiya yetu sote tuilinde, tuwajibike, tuimarike, umoja wetu ni nguzo yetu, idumu jumuiya yetu. Viwandani na hata mashambani, tufanye kazi sote kwa makini, tujitoe kwa hali na mali, tuijenge jumuiya bora. Jumuiya yetu sote tuilinde, tuwajibike, tuimarike, umoja wetu ni nguzo yetu, idumu jumuiya yetu.
Okay, thank you so much. You can now break. May God bless you, and thank you for those who are traveling. Have a safe journey, and thank you again.